Hello everyone, in today's video I will be narrating stories that I found off of Reddit. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to my channel, like this video, and comment something down below. But without further ado,
let's get straight into these stories.
I work at a small, family-run diner on the outskirts of town. It's the kind of place that sees a steady flow of regulars, truckers passing through, and the occasional lost tourist looking for a quick bite. It's nothing fancy, just a few booths, a long counter, and a kitchen that always smells like bacon grease and coffee. We close at midnight, and on most nights, I handle the last shift alone, save for the cook in the back. It's usually quiet by then. The late-night regulars keep to themselves, nursing their coffees, scrolling their phones, or chatting in low voices. But one man always stood out. He came in every night at exactly 11:30, never earlier, never later. He wasn't a regular in the usual sense. He never spoke to anyone, never made eye contact, and never deviated from his routine. He would walk in, sit in the farthest booth, order the same thing, a plain hamburger, no toppings, no fries, and a glass of water. Then he would that was the unsettling part. He didn't eat like a normal person. He took small, calculated bites, chewing so slowly it was almost mechanical. He never used his hands, only the dull diner knife and fork, slicing the burger into precise pieces. He ate every meal like it was his last, like he was memorizing the sensation of every bite. In the way he watched people, no, not watched, exactly. It was more like he was waiting. The first few weeks, I chalked it up to harmless eccentricity. Maybe he had a disorder, or maybe he was just a lonely man with a rigid routine. But then, small things started to get off. One night, after he left, I went to clear his table and found the knife still resting on his plate, upright, as if he just placed it down mid-motion. The burger had been cut into perfect squares, but only half had been eaten. The rest sat there untouched. Another night, I noticed he never blinked. That once, he would sit there, eating in that slow, deliberate manner, staring straight ahead, unblinking, for the entire 30 minutes he was there. Then, last night happened. It was quiet, just me and the cook in the back, when he walked in at his usual time. But something felt different. His steps were heavier, his movements less fluid, and when he sat down, he didn't immediately look at the menu like he always did. Instead, he turned his head, slowly, unnaturally, until he was looking directly at me. Not at the menu, not at his usual seat, at me. My stomach turned to ice. I forced a polite smile and grabbed my notepad, but my hands were trembly. "Your usual?" I asked, my voice coming out weaker than I wanted. He didn't respond right away. He just kept looking at me. Then, in a voice that didn't sound quite right, too smooth, too careful, he said, "I've been practicing." I don't know why, but that sentence hit me like a gut punch. "Practicing what?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. For the first time, he smiled, a slow, creeping smile that didn't reach his eyes. He leaned forward, just slightly, and whispered, "Eating like you." I stepped back instinctively, knocking into the counter behind me. My breath hitched. Before I could say anything, he did something he had never done before. He stood up. He had never left before finishing his meal. But last night, he stood up, walked out of the diner, and disappeared into the dark. He didn't pay. He didn't say goodbye. Just left. I told my manager everything this morning. She checked the security footage, and that's when I realized the most disturbing thing. We have recordings of every night he had been here. Every night, the same booth, the same meal, the same brutality. But not last night. Last night, the camera showed me walking to this table, talking to an empty sit, taking an order that no one had given, bringing food to a booth that no one had ever sat in. But I knew what I saw. I know he was there. I didn't sleep that night. I told myself it was a trick of the cameras, a glitch, a coincidence. Maybe the footage was corrupted. Maybe the camera was angled wrong. Maybe my mind was just playing tricks on me after weeks of watching this strange man eat alone. But deep down, I knew he had been there. I could still hear his voice in my head. I've been practicing. Practicing what? Acting normal, bloodied and, or something worse. I decided not to go to work the next night. I told my manager I was sick and spent the evening locked in my apartment, pacing. Every noise outside made me jump. Every shadow seemed too long. I kept checking the logs, making sure the windows were shut. I even considered calling the police, but what would I say? A man who doesn't exist has been watching me eat burgers for weeks. At around 11:30, the time he would normally come in, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I stared at it for a long time before answering. I didn't say anything. Neither did they. But I could hear something. A slow, wet chewing sound. My stomach flipped. I hung up and threw my phone on the couch like it was contaminated. My hands were shaking. I didn't know what to do. If I called back, would he answer? And then a knock at my door. A single, sharp knock. I froze. I live on the 3rd floor. There's only one entrance. No one buzzed up. No footsteps. footsteps in the hallway, but someone was standing on the other side of my door. I crept toward the peephole, every part of me screaming to stay back, and then I heard it. A slow, deliberate whisper. I think I've got it now. I didn't look. I couldn't. Instead, I turned off every light, crawled into my bathroom, and locked the door. I stayed there for hours, heart hammering in my chest, waiting for the sound of footsteps, the creak of the door, a shadow under the crack. Nothing. Eventually, the sun rose, and I dared to peek outside. There was no one there, but on my welcome mat, sitting neatly in the center, was a hamburger, plain, no toppings, cut into perfect squares. I quit my job that morning. I moved in with a friend across town. I changed my number. I don't go out alone after dark. I haven't stepped foot near the diner since, and I haven't seen him again. But sometimes, late at night, when I least expect it, I hear the sound of slow, deliberate chewing. For a while, I convinced myself that it was over. I left the diner, changed my number, moved to a different neighborhood, and tried to push it all out of my mind. I told myself he was just a weirdo, someone with a strange obsession, and that if I stayed away, he would forget about me. I was wrong. It started again about a month later. I was staying with my friend Jenna, crashing on her couch while I figured out my next move. One night, she decided to order takeout, and I offered to grab it from the front door. It was late, maybe 10:30, and the street was quiet. I stepped outside, grabbed the bag, and turned to head back in, and then I saw it. Sitting on the porch railing, neatly placed in the center, was a single white plate, a plate hamburger, cut into perfect squares. My blood ran cold. I didn't say anything to Jenna. I didn't want to scare her. I just picked up the plate, walked to the trash bin, and threw it away. My hands were shaking the whole time. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, Jenna mentioned something that made my stomach turn. "Did you hear someone outside last night?" she asked, pouring herself coffee. I thought I heard footsteps on the porch around, I don't know, 3 a.m. I forced a smile, shook my head, and said I hadn't heard anything. That was the first lie. 2 nights later, it happened again. This time, the plate was inside. I woke up groggy, rubbing my eyes, and shuffled into the kitchen for coffee. And there it was, on the kitchen table, a plate hamburger, cut into perfect squares. I nearly dropped my mug. My hands went cold. I turned to Jenna, heart pounding. Did you leave this here?" My voice came out hoarse, barely a whisper. She frowned, confused. "What? No, I just woke up. What are you talking about?" I pointed at the plate, my entire body trembling. Her expression changed. Confusion melted into fear. Neither of us had put it there, and yet it sat there, neat, deliberate, waiting. Jenna grabbed her phone and called the cops. They came, took our statements, and looked around, but there were no signs of forced entry. The doors were locked, the windows were shut, no fingerprints, nothing missing. They told us it was probably a prank, that someone had broken in just to leave food on the table. They offered to send extra patrols in the area. I nodded. I thanked them. I pretended to feel better, but I knew the truth. He had been inside, and he was getting closer. Jenna and I started locking every door, every window, every night. We even pushed furniture in front of the doors. I barely slept. My nerves were fried. I was jumping at every noise. But for a week, nothing happened. Then, one morning, I opened the fridge, and there it was, a plain hamburger, cut into perfect squares. I slammed the door shut so hard the shelves rattled. I backed away, heart hammering, bile rising in my throat. Jenna came running. I pointed at the fridge, unable to speak. She opened it, saw the plate, covered her mouth with her hand. "We're leaving," she whispered. We packed it under an hour. Jenna went to stay with her parents. I moved into a short-term rental under a different name. I wanted to disappear. That night, my phone rang, an unknown number. I shouldn't have answered. I knew I shouldn't have answered, but my hands moved on their own, lifting the phone to my ear. Silence, then a slow, wet chewing sound, and a whisper. "You eat so naturally now." I threw the phone across the room. I never answered an unknown number again. I never stayed at one place for too long. I never ever eat hamburgers anymore. I live in a small town where everything closes early and most people keep to themselves. One of my favorite things to do is take late night walks. It's peaceful, quiet, and I rarely run into anyone. The town is well lit, and I always stick to main roads, so I've never felt unsafe. That changed one night. I was walking my usual route, past the closed bakery and the darkened windows of the pharmacy, when I noticed something odd. A man was walking toward me on the opposite sidewalk, but his stride was it was almost like he wasn't bending his knees, his steps mechanical and deliberate. He was looking straight ahead, not at me, not at anything, just staring forward. I didn't think much of it at first. Some people are just weird, right? But then, as we passed each other, I got this overwhelming sense of wrongness. I don't know how else to describe it. My skin prickled, my stomach knotted, and my instincts screamed at me to keep walking, to not look back. I ignored them. Glancing over my shoulder, I saw something that still makes my blood run cold. The man had stopped. He was standing completely still in the middle of the sidewalk, his head tilted slightly as if he were listening listening for something, and then, without turning around, he started walking again. But this time, he was going back the way he came. That shouldn't have been so terrifying, but it was. His movements were just as stiff, his posture just as unnerving. It was like he had been placed on a track, walking a programmed path, and suddenly, the script had changed. I picked up my pace. My apartment was only a few blocks away. I told myself it was nothing, that I was overreacting. Then I heard it. Footsteps. I didn't need to turn around to know they belonged to him. They were too precise, too evenly spaced, too unnatural. I reached my building and yanked the door open, practically throwing myself inside. The second it shut behind me, I turned the lock and pressed myself against the wood, listening. Silence. After a few minutes, I gathered the courage to peek through the peephole. The street outside was empty. The man was gone. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I convinced myself it was just some strange guy passing through town. Maybe he was lost. Maybe he was sick. I wanted to believe that. Then, the next night, I saw him again, standing across the street, not walking, not moving, just watching. I moved out 2 weeks later. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things. Sleep deprivation, paranoia, maybe even just the lingering effects of fear from the night before. But the man wasn't a figment of my imagination. For 3 nights straight, he was there, always across the street from my apartment, never closer, never farther, just standing in the same spot, at the same time, never moving, never reacting. At first, I thought he was staring at me, but the longer I watched, the more I realized he wasn't looking at anything at all. His head was tilted just slightly, like he was listening again, like he was waiting. On the 4th night, I stopped looking. I shut my blinds, locked my doors, and forced myself to act like he wasn't out there. It didn't help. I could still feel him. The air in my apartment felt heavier, thick with the suffocating presence of something I couldn't explain. I didn't sleep that night, and then on the 5th night, he was gone. I cracked the blinds open at 11 p.m. Nothing. That night, still nothing. By 1 a.m., I started to believe it was over, until I heard a sound from the hallway outside my apartment. Tap, tap, tap. It was slow, deliberate, almost like footsteps, but they were too light, too measured, and they didn't move. They just stayed right outside my door. I sat frozen on my couch, staring at the door like it might fly off its hinges. My mind screamed at me to check the peephole, but my body wouldn't cooperate. Every nerve in my body told me not to look. Then something changed. The air in my apartment shifted, like the room itself was holding its breath. And then I heard it. A whisper, not words, not a voice I could recognize, just something low and broken, like the sound of static through an old radio. It came from right outside the door, creeping in through the wood, slipping beneath the frame. I was shaking. My hands were cold, my breath uneven. Every single instinct screamed at me to stay still, to not move, to not breathe too loudly. And then, just like that, it stopped. The air returned to normal. The pressure lifted, and when I finally worked up the courage to check the peephole, the hallway was empty. The man never came back after that. But the strangest part, the next morning, I asked my neighbor, an old man who had lived in the building for over 30 years, if he had ever seen anything weird around here, if he had ever noticed a man standing outside, or heard noises in the hallways at night. He gave me a strange look and shook his head. No, he said, frowning, but I'll tell you something, you're not the first tenant in that apartment to ask me that. I moved out that weekend. I don't know who or what the man was. I don't know if he was real, if he was something else entirely, or if my mind twisted some coincidence into a waking nightmare. But I do know one thing. I wish I could say that was the end of it. That moving out put an end to whatever had been following me. But things don't work that cleanly, do they? For a while, it seemed like it did. My new place was across town, in a busier area. More people, more noise. It felt safer. I told myself it was over, and for a few months, it was. Then, one night, I was walking home from a late shift at work. The air was cold, the streets wet from a recent rain. The city felt alive, the way only cities do at night. Traffic lights flickering, distant sirens, the hum of people in bars and restaurants. And then, between all of that, a familiar sound. Tap, tap, tap. I stopped mid-step. My stomach dropped. My skin prickled with the unmistakable feeling of being watched. I turned my head slowly, my pulse hammering in my throat. At first, I didn't see anything, just a street lamp casting a pool of yellow light onto the wet sidewalk. A few parked cars, the entrance to an alleyway. Then I saw him, standing just beyond the glow of the street light, where the darkness was thickest. The man, he wasn't moving. He wasn't walking toward me. He was just standing there, half shrouded in shadow, his head tilted ever so slightly, listening. The wrongness of it hit me like a brick to the chest. I took a step back. He took a step forward. I didn't wait. I turned and walked fast, faster than I ever had before. My heart was in my throat, my breath short and ragged. I could hear footsteps behind me, steady, even, perfectly paced. I didn't dare look back. I made it to my apartment, slammed the door, and locked it. My whole body was trembling, my fingers ice cold. I pressed my ear against the door, silent. I didn't sleep that night, or the night after that. I tried to convince myself I was wrong, that it was just a coincidence. But I do. And then 2 days later, I got a text, a number I didn't recognize. One word, listening. I don't know how he got my number. I don't know how he found me, but I do know one thing. No matter where I go, no matter how far I run, he will always be just a step behind, waited, listening, and I don't think I'll ever be able to stop him. I used to work in a small, independent bookstore in a quiet town. It wasn't particularly old or famous, just a cozy little place with wooden shelves and a resident cat named Theo. The store sat at the far end of Birch Street, away from the busier parts of town, and at night, it always felt a little too quiet. My shifts usually ended around 10 p.m., and since my apartment was only a few blocks away, I'd walk home alone. It was never a problem, until the night I met Eddie. It started when I was closing up. I had just turned off the lights when I noticed movement outside the front window. A man stood there, just beyond the glow of the street lamp, watching me. He wasn't close enough for me to see his face clearly, but something about the way he stood, perfectly still, made my skin crawl. I hesitated, then stepped toward the door, trying to act like I hadn't seen him. Maybe he was just a late customer, disappointed we were closed. But as I reached for the lock, he moved just slightly, not stepping forward, not waving, just a shift of weight, like he was waiting for something. I locked the door quickly and turned off the open sign. I figured he'd get the message and leave, but he didn't. Instead, he drifted to the side of the store, disappearing out of sight. I waited a minute, heart hammering in my chest, before grabbing my bag and heading for the back exit. The alley behind the store was dimly lit, but it led straight to the main road. I stepped out cautiously, glancing both ways. Empty. I exhaled, feeling ridiculous for being so paranoid, and started walking. Halfway down the alley, I heard it. Footsteps, not behind me, not approaching, just there, like they were keeping pace with me, but from nowhere. They stopped, so did the footsteps. I took another step, so did they. The cold sweat broke out on my neck. I spun around, scanning the alley, but there was no one. No one in the shadows, no one near the dumpsters, no one in the recessed doorway of the old bakery. I forced myself to move faster, nearly jogging as I reached the street. I didn't stop until I was at my apartment door, slamming it shut behind me and bolting every lock. I barely slept that night. The next evening, I told my manager what had happened. She gave me a sympathetic look but shrugged it off as a one-time encounter. Probably just some weirdo, she said. We'll keep an eye out. That night, I left work with Theo in my arms. One of the perks of working there was that I could take him home when I closed. He purred in my jacket as I walked. The street was empty, the bookstore dark behind me. And then I saw him again, not standing on the sidewalk this time, standing in the bookstore. The lights were off, the door was locked, I knew that. But there he was, standing in the darkness between the shelves, just barely visible through the window. And he was looking at me. I bolted. I don't remember getting home, but I do remember locking myself in my bedroom. Theo still clutched in my arms, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might be sick. The next day, I called out of work. When I finally returned, 2 days later, my manager was waiting for me with a frown. "You didn't lock up properly the other night," she said. My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" She gestured to the back exit. The door was unlocked when I came in the next morning. I felt like the ground had vanished beneath me. I knew I had locked it. I quit that same week. A few months later, the bookstore closed for good. But sometimes, when I pass by the empty building, I swear I still see him, standing there, watching and waited. A few months after I quit, the bookstore officially shut down. The owner had been struggling financially for a while, and I guess my creepy encounter was just another reason to leave it behind. For a while, I avoided Birch Street completely. I took longer routes to work, dodging the eerie feeling that always lingered when I thought about the store. But time passed, and the fear dulled, at least, I thought it did. One evening, I was walking home from a late shift at my new job when I found myself near Birch Street without thinking. The street was quieter than I remembered, the bookstore now dark and lifeless with a for lease sign in the dusty front window. The sight gave me a strange sense of relief. Maybe the man, whatever he was, had moved on too. Then, I saw the door. It was open, just slightly, barely an inch, but open enough that the darkness inside seemed to bleed out into the street. A cold wave of dread washed over me. This door had been empty for months. There was no reason for that door to be open. I told myself to keep walking, to pretend I hadn't seen it, but then something shifted inside the store. A flicker of motion, like someone moving between the empty shelves. I should have run. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move, and then something stepped into the doorway. Not a person, at least, not fully. The shape was wrong, tall, too tall for the frame, its head nearly brushing the top. Its shoulders were narrow, its limbs elongated, and its face. I still don't know what I saw. It wasn't a mask, wasn't a shadow. It was something empty, like looking into a place where a person should be, but wasn't. And then it moved, not toward me, but closer somehow, without stepping forward. Like the space between us had shrunk in an instant. I stumbled backward, my body finally kicking into motion. My hands scrambled for my phone, but I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. I turned and ran. I don't remember getting home. I just remember locking my door, shutting every curtain, and curling up on my bed with Theo pressed against my chest, my heart slamming so hard it hurt. That night, I barely slept, but in the few minutes I did, I dreamed of the bookstore, of it, watching it, waited. I moved out of that town a few weeks later. I never told anyone what I saw, and I never looked back, but sometimes, when I pass by a darkened storefront, when I see a door just barely ajar, I get that same feeling in my gut, like something is waiting, watching, still looking for me. I moved 3 towns over, started fresh, new job, new apartment, new routine. I even convinced myself that what happened on Birch Street was some kind of waking nightmare, a trick of exhaustion and fear. For a while, things were normal, until they worked. It started small, a feeling of being watched when I walked home, lights flickering just as I passed by, like Cat, Theo, hissing at the front door for no reason. Then, the dreams came back. Not dreams, the same dream. I'm standing in front of the bookstore again. The door is open just a crack. I know I shouldn't go inside, but something is pulling me forward. I step inside. The shelves are empty, the air thick with dust, but in the back of the store, in the shadows, something is waiting. I wake up gasping, my heart pounding, every time, just before I see its face. At first, I told myself it was just stress, that I was still haunted by what happened, and my mind was playing tricks on me. But then, the real world sign started. One evening, after a late shift, I came home to find my apartment door unlocked. I was sure I had locked it when I left. My stomach nodded as I pushed the door open, but everything inside looked normal. Nothing was stolen, nothing was out of place. The only thing different, Theo was hiding under the bed, his fur bristled, his eyes wide with terror. I locked the door, checked every room, every closet. Nothing, but I didn't sleep at night. The next day, I asked my landlord if maintenance had come in while I was gone. He shook his head. There would have been inside. That's when I knew. I hadn't escaped it. A week later, I got home from work and found a book sitting on my kitchen table. A book I did not own. It was old, too old. The pages yellowed, the spine cracked. There was no title, no author, just a single sentence scrawled across the first page in jagged, uneven handwriting. He left the door open. I slammed the book shut, my pulse roaring in my ears. I had never brought this book into my apartment. I grabbed Theo, shoved him into his carrier, and left. I didn't pack, didn't think. I just left. I checked into a hotel that night and didn't go back for 3 days. When I finally returned, I half expected my apartment to be ransacked, or worse, for the book to be gone. But no, it was still there, sitting in the exact same place on my kitchen table. I moved out that week. I don't know what it was. I don't know how it followed me, but I know one thing. It's not just a man. It never was. And I don't think it's done with me yet. So if you ever find yourself walking past a bookstore at night, one that feels too quiet, too empty, keep walking. I never liked planetariums. Something about the darkness, the simulated sky, and the way the room feels larger than it should be always unsettled me. But when my friend Jenna begged me to go with her to a special late night showing at our local planetarium, I gave in. It was a one-night only event, an exclusive screening of a newly discovered star system, supposedly accompanied by a special surprise. The promotional flyer was vague, but Jenna was excited, and I didn't want to be the boring friend. The place wasn't crowded, maybe a dozen people scattered throughout the vast dome-shaped theater. Jenna and I took seats near the back, directly in the center. The air smelled slightly stale, like old carpet and something metallic. The show began normally enough, the usual deep voice narrator explaining cosmic formations as the ceiling transformed into a sea of stars. I let myself relax. The visuals were mesmerizing. Then, the special surprise segment started. The narrator's voice cut out mid-sentence. The screen went completely black. I expected an effect, maybe a simulated blackout to make the stars pop more dramatically. Instead, silence stretched long enough that people began shifting in their seats. Then a single point of white light appeared on the ceiling. A star. No, it wasn't twinkling. It grew larger, brighter, until it was the size of the full moon. And then it blinked. Not flickered, blinked. A slow, deliberate movement. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Someone laughed nervously. The eye, because that's what it was, an enormous eye, began scanning the room. Its gaze drifted across the seats, searching. I squeezed Jenna's arm. What the hell is this? She didn't answer. I turned to her, but she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the row ahead of us. There was a man sitting there. I hadn't noticed him before, and something about him didn't feel right. His head was tilted back too far, like his neck was broken, staring directly at the blinking eye above us. He was smiling. No one else seemed to notice him. The eye moved again, faster this time. It darted between audience members, the light from it illuminating their faces in sharp contrast. Each time it stopped on someone, they flinched or shifted uncomfortably as if feeling some unseen pressure. Then it stopped on me. I swear to God, I felt it. A horrible, cold weight settled over me, pressing against my chest like something unseen was leaning in. I wanted to move, to run, but I couldn't. My limbs refused to respond. The man in front of me let out a slow, rattling laugh. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the screen cut back to a normal starry sky. The narrator's voice resumed mid-sentence, as if nothing had happened. The audience shuffled awkwardly. People chuckled, whispered about how creepy that segment was. But the man in front of me, he was gone. Jenna and I bolted out of the theater the second the lights came up. We didn't talk until we were outside, under the safety of real stars. I don't think that was part of the show, she finally said. I agreed. We never found out what that special surprise was supposed to be. I checked online later. There were no mentions of a late night event at the planetarium. No advertisements, no records, nothing. And here's the part that keeps me up at night. A few days later, I was scrolling through my photos when I found one I don't remember taking. It's blurry, grainy, like it was snapped in motion. But I know what it is. The last row of the planetarium, and in the center of the frame, sitting in my seat, was me. I stared at the photo for a long time, trying to make sense of it. It had to be a glitch, a trick of the light, maybe a reflection. But no, the figure in the seat was unmistakably me. Same jacket, same posture, same damn way I sit with one hand on my knee. I checked the metadata. The timestamp said it was taken 7 minutes after we left the planetarium. My stomach turned. I hadn't taken this. Jenna wouldn't have taken this. And even if she had, how would it show me sitting there when I was already outside? I showed it to her the next day, and the second she saw it, she turned pale. Delete it, she whispered. What? Delete it. There was something raw in her voice, something I'd never heard before. I hesitated for a second, but then did it. I deleted the photo from my gallery, went into the trash folder, and wiped it for good measure. Jenna exhaled in relief. Good, it's gone. But that night, at exactly 2:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. New photos saved to your gallery. My throat closed up. My hands were clammy as I opened my gallery, dreading what I would see. It was the same picture, same angle, same me. Only this time, I wasn't alone. There was someone sitting next to me. I wish I could tell you what they looked like, but I can't. My mind will hold on to the details. Every time I try to focus, it's like my brain refuses to process their face, like the image won't let me remember. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Jenna wouldn't answer my calls. I finally drove to her apartment, knocking until she let me in. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her hands trembling. I got one too, she said before I could even ask. She held up her phone. It was my seat in the planetarium again, but this time, the figure sitting there wasn't me. It was her. I don't know what's happening. I don't know what we sat through that night, but we haven't gone back to the planetarium. And every night at 2:17 a.m., a new photo appears on my phone. Each time, the image is a little clearer. Each time, the thing sitting next to me looks a little closer. And last night, I swear to God, I felt something breathe on the back of my neck. I didn't sleep at all last night. Every time I closed my eyes, I swore I could hear something faint, like the shuffle of fabric against a seat, like someone shifting in the darkness behind me. At 2:17 a.m., my phone buzzed again. I didn't want to look, but I had to. The photo had changed. It was still the planetarium, still my seat, still that figure sitting next to me, only this time, I could almost see its face. The details were still blurred, like a corrupted file, but it had shifted its posture. It was leaning forward slightly, facing the camera, face away. I dropped my phone and scrambled away from it like it had burned me. My heart was hammering in my chest, my skin ice cold. I called Jenna, but she didn't pick up. I called again. Nothing. Something was wrong. I grabbed my keys and drove to her apartment as fast as I could. Her car was in the lot. Lights off, curtains drawn in. I knocked. No answer. I pounded harder. Jenna, it's me. Open the door. Still nothing. I don't know what possessed me to try the handle, but I did. I turned easily. Unlocked. Inside, the apartment was silent. Too silent. No humming appliances. No street noise. Nothing. Just a thick, suffocating stillness. Jenna's phone was on the counter. The screen was on, stuck on her gallery. I picked it up with shaking hands. There was a new photo. Her seat at the planetarium, but Jenna wasn't in it. Instead, the thing in the seat was now sitting alone. No blurred features. No distortion. It was fully visible, and it was smiling. I read. I didn't stop running until I was back in my car, locking the doors, gasping for breath. I didn't know what to do. Who to call? The police. What the hell would I tell them? Jenna was gone, and whatever had taken her had left a message. My phone buzzed again. I didn't want to look, but my body moved on its own. A live notification from my camera. Face detected. Tap to view. I was alone in the car. I didn't tap. I didn't move. I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, pulse pounding in my ears. And then, in the silence, I heard it. A slow, deliberate exhale right behind me. I'm writing this from a motel on the edge of town. I don't know what to do. I don't know where Jenna is. I don't even know if she's still Jenna anymore. And worst of all, tonight's photo has already appeared. It's a picture of my seat at the planetarium, and this time, it's empty. I was never one for fancy gifts, but when my sister gifted me a voucher for a private calligraphy lesson, I figured, why not? It was something different. The place was a tiny, unassuming shop sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a locksmith in a part of town I didn't usually visit. When I arrived, the door was slightly ajar, and a small brass bell jingled as I stepped inside. The air smelled of ink and old paper. Shelves lined the walls, crammed with ornate pens, parchment, and delicate bottles of ink. A single large table sat in the middle, covered in parchment scraps and an array of nibs and brushes. At the far end of the shop, a man was seated with his back to me, writing with slow, deliberate strokes. "Hello," I called softly. He didn't turn right away. Instead, he finished the stroke he was working on before placing the pen down with a careful precision. Then, he rose smoothly and turned to face me. The man was old but not frail. He had an odd, statuesque stillness about him, his posture unnervingly straight. His suit was immaculate, but what stood out the most was his face. It wasn't disfigured or grotesque, nothing so obvious, but something about it was off, as though it was too symmetrical, too smooth, like a face you'd see in a painting rather than on a living person. "You must be the student," he said in a voice that was deep and measured. I nodded and introduced myself. He simply gestured for me to sit. The lesson began normally enough. He explained different techniques, demonstrated how to hold the pen, how to control pressure, but then he took out a roll of parchment older than the ones I had seen before. The edges were slightly curled, tinged with a yellowish hue. "Try copying this," he instructed, rolling it out in front of me. The script was intricate, winding letters unlike any language I recognized. They were beautiful, almost hypnotic in the way they twisted and looped together. "What language is this?" I asked. His lips barely curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "It is old." That was all he said. I should have left then, but I didn't. I dipped the pen into the ink, hesitating only a second before copying the first character. The moment my pen touched the parchment, I felt a shift, a static-like pressure in the air, as if the room itself exhaled. My fingers tingled, and an unexplainable unease crept up my spine. I forced myself to keep writing, but with each stroke, the room felt tighter. The shadows stretched strangely. The air grew thick, like I was underwater. My heart pounded, and then something moved. Not the man, not me. The ink, it slithered, just slightly, like something beneath it was shifting. I gasped, dropping the pen, and pushed back from the table. The man watched me, expression unchanged. "You feel it, don't you?" I could only stare at the parchment. The letters I had written, imperfect and clumsy, were gone. The rest of the script remained, but my additions had vanished completely, as if they had been absorbed. I didn't ask questions. I stood abruptly, muttered something about needing to leave, and backed away. The man tilted his head. "You are not finished," he said, but I was already at the door. I yanked it open and stumbled outside, barely hearing the bell jingle behind me. The moment I was out, the suffocating pressure lifted. I turned back only once. Through the shop's window, the man was still seated, watching me. The parchment was in front of him, and I swear, I saw it move. I don't know what I wrote. I don't want to know. I wish I could say that was the end of it, that I left, and life returned to normal, but it didn't. That night, I dreamt of ink, thick, black ink seeping through my fingers, pulling onto a page I couldn't see. It dripped in slow, heavy drops, spelling out words in a language I didn't understand, and underneath the ink, something was moving, shifting, watching. I woke up gasping, my sheets damp with sweat. The next morning, my first instinct was to throw out everything from the lesson, the pen, the parchment scraps, even the clothes I wore that day. But when I reached into my bag to grab them, the parchment wasn't there. I knew I had taken it. I remembered shoving it into my bag before leaving, but it was gone. At work, I felt, like I wasn't alone, even when I was. A weight pressed between my shoulders, like something unseen was standing just behind me, watching. Several times, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye, just a flicker, just a shadow, but when I turned, nothing was there. By nightfall, I was exhausted, but sleep didn't come easily. When I finally drifted off, the dreams returned. This time, I wasn't just watching the ink, I was writing. In the dream, my hand moved against my will, dipping a quill into an inkwell and dragging it across parchment. I could feel the rough texture of the paper, the smooth glide of the ink. I couldn't stop. Letter by letter, I traced the symbols, and as I wrote, I felt something stir. Somewhere in the distance, a whisper, not a voice, something older, something deeper. It rumbled beneath my skin, curling around my ribs like unseen fingers. I woke up with a start, my hand cramping, and that was when I saw it. On my bedside table, where I knew I had left nothing, sat a fresh piece of parchment. On it, in my own handwriting, were the same symbols from the lesson. I lost my mind a little after that. I skipped work, kept the lights on, threw out every pen and notebook I owned. I didn't care if it was irrational, I wasn't taking any chances. And still, the dreams continued. Every night, I wrote. Every morning, a new parchment would be waiting. I tried to destroy them, burn them, tear them, throw them into water, but it never mattered. They always came back, pristine and untouched. After a week, I was a wreck. I hadn't slept. I barely ate. It felt like something was burrowing into my thoughts, carving out pieces of me to make room for it. I had to go back. The shop looked the same, like nothing had happened. I hesitated at the door, hand trembling on the handle. The bell jingled when I stepped inside. The air still smelled of ink and old paper, but the table was empty. The calligrapher wasn't there. I stepped forward, heart pounding, hello, no answer, a rustle, then a whisper. I turned sharply, but there was no one, just the shelves, the parchment, the pens. But something was wrong. I could hear the whispering, but it wasn't coming from a person. It was coming from the pages, hundreds of them, stacked neatly, bound in books, tucked into drawers. The ink on them was moving, shifting, like something underneath was breathing. I took a step back, and then I saw it. On the center table, waiting for me, was a single blank parchment. A pen rested beside it, uncapped, ink glistening. The whispering grew louder, urgent, and beneath it, layered within the murmur of shifting ink, I heard something else. My own voice, writing, then finishing. I read. I don't know how I made it home. I don't know if I was followed. I don't know if I ever really left that shop. All I know is that the dream stopped after that, but sometimes, late at night, I wake up to find ink on my fingers. And no matter how many times I move apartments, no matter how many times I check, I always find a fresh piece of parchment waiting, and the whispering never really goes away. I stopped sleeping. It didn't matter how exhausted I was, I knew what waited for me when I closed my eyes. The whispering never stopped. Some nights, it was a low murmur, barely noticeable over the hum of the city. Other nights, it was relentless, pressing into my skull like ink seeping into paper. I'd wake up with my hands twitching, aching as if I'd been writing for hours. And always, there was the parchment. It followed me. I'd moved 3 times, threw out every page I found. And yet, the moment I let my guard down, there it was again, sitting on my desk, my kitchen counter, my bedside table. Waited. The writing had changed, though. It wasn't just the same symbols from before. It was my own handwriting now. Sometimes it was just a sentence. Other times, full pages of text I didn't remember writing. I stopped reading them after the first few, because the first time I did, I saw something I couldn't explain. I had written about things that hadn't happened yet, and then they did. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was some kind of elaborate stress-induced hallucination, that I was sleepwalking, writing in my sleep, that my mind was playing tricks on me. But then, one night, the whispering changed. It wasn't coming from the parchment anymore. It was coming from inside my apartment. I froze. It was past midnight. My lights were off, and I was alone. Or at least, I was supposed to be. The whispering wasn't a sound anymore. It was a presence. A shape pressing against the edges of the darkness. My heart pounded as I turned on the nearest light. The whispering stopped, but there was someone standing in my doorway. Not a shadow, not a trick of the light. A person. No, not a person. It was him, the calligrapher. He stood unnaturally still, the same eerie smoothness to his face, the same too perfect suit. His hands were folded in front of him, perfectly clean, perfectly composed. He shouldn't have been there. The door was locked. My apartment was on the 5th floor. I opened my mouth to scream, but before I could, he raised one hand. A single finger pressed to his lips. A warning. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, and then he spoke. You are nearly finished. His voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. It cut through the air, through me. I shook my head, backing away. I don't know what you mean. He took a single step forward. Your work is almost complete. I didn't realize I was crying until I tasted salt on my lips. I don't want to write anymore, I whispered. His expression didn't change. That is not for you to decide. Then he reached into his coat. He pulled out a pen, the same one I had used in the lesson, the same one I had left behind. He held it out to me. My body moved on its own, fingers curling, reaching. I tried to fight it, to stop, but my hands were no longer my own. I could hear the whispering inside me now. It wasn't coming from the ink. It was coming from my bones. I had to do something, so I did the only thing I could. I closed my eyes. I clenched my fists so tight my nails dug into my palms, and I willed myself to wake up, to break free, to do anything but write. The whispering turned to a roar, and then silence. When I opened my eyes, I was alone. The calligrapher was gone. The whispering was gone, but the pen was still there, sitting on on my desk. Waited. I didn't sleep that night, or the next, or the next. I was afraid to, because I knew, deep down, I knew that if I did, I would wake up to find myself writing again. That if I so much as picked up that pen, I would finish whatever I had started, and I didn't want to know what happened when I did. I don't know how much time has passed since then. Days, weeks. Time feels strange now. The whispery hasn't come back, but neither has the silence. I still see ink smudges on my fingers sometimes, even though I haven't touched a pen, and I still find the parchment, always blank, always waiting. I don't know what I was writing. I don't know who or what wanted me to finish. I was visiting my best friend, Lauren, who had just moved into an old brownstone apartment near the city center. The building was charming in that probably haunted but definitely overpriced kind of way. High ceilings, intricate crown molding, and a staircase that groaned no matter how lightly you stepped. Lauren had been there for about a month and loved it, except for one thing. There's something weird about the stairwell mirror, she said one night as we sat on her floor eating takeout. Every time I walk past it, I feel like I catch something in the reflection. Just for a second, I laughed. Like what? A ghost? She rolled her eyes. No, just something. The mirror in question was huge. An old, gilded thing bolted to the wall on the landing between the second and third floors. It had probably been there since the building was constructed. I'd walked past it earlier, but nothing had seemed out of place. Still, I couldn't shake the thought of it. Later that night, when I was heading to bed in her guest room, I remembered I left my phone downstairs. I padded out into the hallway and toward the staircase. The whole building was dead silent. As I reached the landing, I slowed down, glancing at the mirror. My reflection was there, of course, but something about it unsettled me. I stepped closer. Everything looked normal. Dim hallway, peeling wallpaper, my own tired face staring back. Then I noticed something in the reflection behind me. A man. He was just barely visible at the edge of the frame, standing at the top of the stairs, half in shadow. I spun around instantly, my heart slamming against my ribs. There was no one there. I turned back to the mirror, but the reflection was normal again. Just the empty hallway stretching behind me. I felt sick. I practically ran back to Lauren's apartment, locked the door behind me, and stayed awake for hours listening for any sound outside. The next morning, I told Lauren what happened. She looked uneasy but not surprised. That's why I hate that mirror, she admitted. We decided to test something. I stood on the landing while she took a photo of the mirror. The first picture looked normal, just me, looking slightly nervous. Then we tried again. This time, I stepped to the side, leaving the reflection of the hallway empty, and there he was, a man, barely visible, standing at the top of the stairs. We both stared at the screen in horror. Lauren deleted the photo immediately. That was the last night I ever stayed there. Lauren moved out 6 months later. At first, I convinced myself that it had been a trick of the light or some old flaw in the glass catching shadows in just the right way, but I knew better. We both did. For a while, things were quiet. Lauren found a new apartment across town, a place without old mirrors bolted to the walls or staircases that seemed to listen when you walked. We didn't talk about what had happened. It felt safer that way, as if ignoring it meant it couldn't follow us. Then, about a year later, she called me in the middle of the night. I saw him again. My stomach dropped. Where? She hesitated. In my new place. But it was different this time. I didn't want to know, but I asked anyway. Lauren took a shaky breath. I was watching TV, and my phone was on the coffee table. The screen was black, like it had just timed out, but I could see the reflection of the room in it, and her voice broke for a second. He was there, standing in the doorway. I felt cold all over. Lauren, are you sure? Maybe it was just... I turned around, and he wasn't there, she said, but the reflection still showed him. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, she whispered, I think he followed me. I wanted to tell her it was impossible, that things like that didn't happen in real life, but I couldn't. I'd seen him too. After that, Lauren stopped staying in one place for too long. Every few months, she'd move again, but no matter where she went, there were signs, reflections that didn't match reality, the shape at the edge of a darkened window, the feeling of someone watching when no one was there. The last time I heard from her was 2 months ago. She sent me a voice message, shaky, breathless. I don't think moving works anymore, she said. I don't think he's following me. I think he's with me. That was it. No goodbye, no explanation. I tried calling her back, but the number was disconnected. Her social media accounts were gone. It was like she had erased herself. And now I'm the one seeing things in the corner of my eye, catching glimpses of something just outside the edges of reflections. Last night, I woke up to the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps outside my bedroom door. When I checked, no one was there, but in the hallway mirror, the door was still open, and he was standing just behind me. A week after that night, I convinced Lauren to talk to her landlord. Not that I expected much. Landlords aren't exactly known for their concern about creepy mirrors or potential apparitions, but to our surprise, he seemed oddly hesitant when she brought it up. He even avoided looking directly at the mirror when we mentioned it. Finally, he sighed and said, "Look, I don't know what you think you saw, but that mirror's been here longer than I have. Some things in this building, they just stay." That was it. No explanation, no reassurance, just a cryptic remark and a quick exit. Lauren and I decided to do our own digging. We searched old property records, local news archives, anything that might explain why that man was appearing in her mirror. And then we found something, a grainy black and white photo from the 1930s and an article about the brownstone's original tenants. It showed a group of men standing in the stairwell dressed in old-fashioned suits. But there was something wrong with the image. One of the men, standing near the top of the stairs, was blurred, not like he had moved while the photo was taken, but like he shouldn't have been there at all. His features were smudged, indistinct, but I recognized the shape of him, the same shape I had seen in the mirror. The article didn't say much, just that the building had once been used as a boarding house. There were mentions of an incident, a man who went missing without a trace, but no follow-up, no resolution. Just another person who stayed. Lauren was done after that. She put in her notice and left within the month, staying with family until she found a new place. I helped her move out, and on our last trip down the stairs, we both paused in front of the mirror one final time. The reflection was empty, just us. For a second, I thought it was over, but then, just before we turned away, something in the mirror shifted. Not a figure this time, just a single fingerprint appearing slowly on the glass, right at eye level. I didn't even think. I grabbed Lauren's wrist, and we bolted. To this day, I refuse to walk past that building, and I don't look too closely at mirrors anymore. When I was a kid, my grandparents lived near an old reservoir. It was a beautiful place, with glassy water stretching out between the hills, but there was always something eerie about it. Maybe it was the way the fog clung to the surface at dawn, or how the water lapped against the shore without a sound. The thing about that reservoir was that it used to be a town. Decades ago, the valley had been flooded to create a water supply, and the entire town, buildings, streets, even the church, was left beneath the surface. Most people didn't talk about it, but sometimes, on dry years when the water was low, you could see the tops of old buildings just under the surface. I had an uncle, Joe, who loved to tell stories about the drowned town. He said you could still hear the church bell ring on cold nights, even though it had been underwater for years. That was just an old tale, but there was one thing he told me that always stuck with me. If you ever see a man standing in the water, don't talk to them. Just turn around and walk away. I thought it was another spooky story until I saw him. It was late summer, and I had taken my bike down to the reservoir alone. The sun was starting to set, casting the water in deep orange and purple, and the air was thick with the smell of damp earth. I was skipping rocks when I noticed something strange. Out in the water, maybe 20 feet from the shore, stood a man. At first, I thought he was just another visitor, maybe a fisherman. But the longer I looked, the more I realized something was wrong. He wasn't moving. He just stood there, half submerged, arms hanging at his sides. The water reached just below his chest, and his clothes were dark and heavy like an old-fashioned suit. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I could tell he was looking at me. A deep, instinctive fear settled into my stomach. It was like my body understood something before my brain did. I took a step back. The man didn't move. Then, the water around him started to ripple, not like waves, but like something was shifting beneath the surface. I turned and ran. I pedaled home so fast I nearly crashed my bike. When I burst into my grandparents' house, gasping for breath, my uncle just looked at me. "You saw him, didn't you?" he said. I nodded. Uncle Joe took a deep breath and told me something I'll never forget. That town wasn't empty when they flooded it. Not everyone left in time. For years, I tried to convince myself that what I saw at the reservoir was just a trick of the light, a shadow, my imagination playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew better. I stayed away from the water. Even when my cousins went swimming or my uncle took his boat out to fish, I never set foot near that shore again. The thought of looking out and seeing him standing there, half submerged, waiting, no, I wasn't willing to take that risk. But the thing about ignoring something strange is that sometimes it doesn't ignore you. It was late one summer night when I woke up to the sound of dripping. At first, I thought it was the bathroom faucet. The house was old, and the pipes made noise sometimes. But as I sat up in bed, I realized the sound wasn't coming from inside the house. It was coming from outside my window. A slow, steady drip, 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 like water spilling off something soaked. I hesitated before pulling the curtain back. The yard outside was empty, bathed in the weak light of the moon. The trees swayed gently, nothing out of place. But then I noticed it, wet footprints leading up to my window from the direction of the reservoir. My stomach dropped. The prints were large, the impressions deep, as if whoever left them had been started carrying something heavy. They stopped right below my window. I didn't see anyone standing there, but the dripping sound continued. I backed away, heart pounding. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to hide, but I couldn't look away. Then, from the silence, I heard something that sent ice through my veins. A faint, distant clanging, like a rusted bell ringing underwater. The next morning, the footprints were gone. No wet patches, no signs of water anywhere. If it weren't for the fact that my sheets were still damp from my own sweat, I could have convinced myself I imagined it, but I didn't. That day, my uncle found me sitting on the porch, staring in the direction of the reservoir. He sat down next to me and lit a cigarette, waiting. He followed you, didn't he? He finally asked. I didn't answer. Uncle Joe exhaled smoke, his expression unreadable. That's how it starts. First you see him, then he finds his way to you. I turned to look at him, fear bubbling in my chest. How do I stop it? My uncle didn't say anything for a long time. Then he crushed his cigarette beneath his boot and stood up. You don't go near the water, and you never answer when he calls. I moved away from my grandparents' town not long after that summer. I never went back to the reservoir, never walked along its shores again. Years passed, and the memory of that night became something I only thought about in the quiet moments when I was alone in the dark. Until last year, I was visiting my parents when I decided to take a drive through my old childhood town just to see what had changed. The reservoir was still there, of course, still eerily still shrouded in mist that clung to the surface. I wasn't planning to stop. I told myself I was just passing through, but then, just as I was about to turn back onto the highway, my headlights caught something standing at the water's edge. A man. His clothes were the same, old and dark, soaked to the bone. His posture was the same, arms limp, head slightly tilted, as if he were waiting. And though I was inside my car, safe, my blood ran cold when I realized one horrible thing. He was closer than before, no longer standing deep in the water, no longer 20 feet away. Now, he was right at the shoreline, right at the edge of the road. And this time, I saw his face. It wasn't bloated, or rotted, or decayed like you'd expect from something that had spent decades underwater. It was just wrong, empty, like something had forgotten how to be human but was still trying to wear a person's skin. His mouth was slightly open, like he was about to speak. And the bell rang, not from a church tower, not from anything visible. It rang from inside my head, loud and echoing, vibrating in my skull, shaking my teeth. My vision blurred. I don't remember turning the wheel, but suddenly I was speeding away from the reservoir, my heart hammering in my chest. I didn't stop until I reached my parents' house, doors locked, lights on. I didn't sleep that night. I haven't gone back since, but sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet, I hear dripping outside my window. And once, just once, I could have sworn I heard a bell ring. I moved again, far away this time, thousands of miles from that reservoir, from the town, from anything that could connect me back to them. I told myself I was safe, that whatever haunted those waters couldn't reach me here. And for a while, it seemed to work. Until last week, it started small, a faint ringing in my ears, like the distant echo of a church bell. I chalked it up to stress, ignored it. But then, the other sound started, dripping, always at night. I checked the pipes, the faucets, the air conditioning. Nothing was leaking. Nothing should have been making that sound. But still, there it was, drip, drip, drip. Then, I began waking up to damp footprints in my apartment. At first, I thought I had tracked in water from outside, but that didn't make sense. The footprints started in the middle of the floor. No trail leading in from the door, no source of water. Just wet, heavy impressions that faded by morning. And the worst part, they were getting closer to my bed. 2 nights ago, I woke up to a noise. Not dripping, not the bell. It was footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming from the hallway outside my bedroom. I froze. I live alone. I reached for my phone, my heart pounding, my pulse hammering in my ears. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. Then, a single, deliberate knock. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. The knock came again, softer this time, and then the water began seeping under the door. Cold, dark, and possibly deep water spreading across the floor toward me. My mind screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. I could only watch as the water pooled around my feet. It should have soaked my bed, my clothes, but it didn't. It just sat there, cold and waiting. Then, something shifted, a shadow under the door. Not a person, not something human. And just before I lost my nerve and bolted, I heard it. A voice. Hello's wrong. Come back. I don't remember jumping out of bed. I don't remember running into the bathroom and slamming the door shut. But I remember standing there, shaking, staring at my reflection in the mirror. Water dripped from my hair, but I hadn't stepped in any. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, the water was gone. No footprints, no puddles, no evidence that anything had happened. But I knew better. I packed a bag, called a friend, told them I needed to stay with them for a while. I don't know if running will help. I don't know if distance makes a difference difference anymore, because last night, before I left, I heard it again. A deep descent rang out, not from a church, not from the street, from inside my apartment, inside my head. And when I turned to look at the front door, I saw something, a reflection in the peephole, dark, soaked, waited. I don't think I can outrun him anymore. So, to the man in the drowned village, please. I used to love the rain, not in the poetic, dance in the storm kind of way. I just liked the way it muted the world, softened everything into a blur. It made things feel smaller, quieter, safer. That was before I met him. I was driving home late one evening from my friend's place, about a 40-minute trip to the windy back roads of my town. The forecast hadn't called for rain, but as I hit the halfway mark, the first few drops tapped against my windshield. Within minutes, it had escalated into a full downpour. My wipers struggled to keep up, and I slowed down, focusing on the white lines of the road. That's when I saw him, a lone figure, walking along the side of the road. No umbrella, no raincoats, just a thin shirt, jeans, and an odd sort of gait, one that wasn't quite a limp, but wasn't normal either. His head was tilted down, and his arms hung limp at his sides. I drove past him, barely sparing another glance. About 10 minutes later, my stomach dropped. I saw him again. Same clothes, same slumped posture, same odd gait. It was impossible. There had been no turnoffs, no shortcuts, just trees and fields and an unbroken stretch of road. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I had just imagined passing him earlier. Maybe it was a different person. But as I drove past, something in me knew it was the same man. I sped up. 15 minutes left. The rain only got heavier, hammering my windshield like nails. The radio crackled with static, and my headlights struggled to cut through the storm. I was gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. Then, ahead in the distance, no. He was there again. This time, he was standing in the middle of the road. I slammed the brakes. My car skidded, tires screaming against the wet pavement, stopping just feet away from him. For the first time, he lifted his head, and he smiled. It wasn't right. His mouth stretched too far, his lips thin and cracked. His teeth were wrong, some too small, some too big, some jagged like they'd been broken and never healed properly. I threw the car into reverse, heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. As I backed up, my headlights flickered just for a second, and in that second, he moved. Not walked, not ran, he just moved, from the front of my car to my driver's side window. I couldn't scream, couldn't breathe as he leaned down, then tapped once, twice, 3 times. I didn't look, I didn't dare. I just slammed the gas and sped past him, heart hammering in my chest. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I didn't look at the road ahead. I just drove. By the time I reached my house, the rain had stopped. My driveway was dry, but my car wasn't. It was soaked, like it had just driven through a storm that didn't exist. I locked my doors, checked my windows, stayed awake until the first light of dawn. I haven't seen him since, but sometimes when it rains, I hear a faint tap once, twice, 3 times. I don't check the window, and I don't think I ever will. For a while after that night, I tried to convince myself it was all in my head. Stress, fatigue, the trick of the light and rain. But then, the tapping started happening inside. The first time, I was in my bedroom, half asleep, with rain pattering softly against my window. I had been doing a good job of ignoring my paranoia, convincing myself I was just overreacting, until I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't coming from outside. It was from my closet door. I froze, every muscle in my body locking into place. My breath caught in my throat, and my stomach turned to ice. I told myself it was nothing. The house settling, the rain playing tricks on my ears. I squeezed my eyes shut and pulled the blanket over my head like a child. But the next morning, my closet door was open, just a crack, and my carpet, which should have been dry, was wet. It didn't stop there. A week later, I was showering, letting the hot water soothe my nerves, trying to wash the fear away. The steam curled around me, fogging up the mirror. Then I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. My heart nearly stopped. It was light, almost playful, from the other side of the shower curtain. I whipped it open, nothing, just steam and empty air. But when I turned to the mirror, something was wrong. The steam had cleared in 3 small, perfect circles, like fingertips that pressed against the glass, like something had been watching me. The last time I heard it was at work. I was staying late at my office, a tiny cubicle job in a half-empty building. It was raining again, harder this time, and most of my coworkers had already left. I kept my headphones in, trying to focus, trying to pretend like everything was fine. Then my screen flickered, and my headphones cut out. Silence. Then tap, tap, tap. My stomach twisted. Slowly, I pulled my headphones off, barely breathing. It was coming from the cubicle behind me. I turned my chair just enough to peek over the divider. No one was there, but there was a puddle of water on the carpet, still fresh, still wet. I grabbed my things and ran. I don't know what he is. I don't know why he follows me, but I know one thing, he only comes when it rains. So now, when I see dark clouds roll in, when I smell the storm on the wind, I leave, I drive, I go where the sky is clear, and I pray that wherever he is, he stays in the rain. I wish that had been the end of it. I really do. For a while, my plane worked. If I saw rain in the forecast, I found somewhere dry. I spent weekends in the desert, took sudden road trips south, anything to stay ahead of the storm. It was exhausting, but it was safe. Until the rain found me anyway. It was late November, and the sky had been clear all day. Not a single cloud. I had let myself relax, just a little, thinking I could finally breathe again. I was at a small roadside motel, just passing through on my way to visit family. At 2:46 a.m., I woke up to the sound of rain. Not a drizzle, not a gentle storm rolling in from the distance. It was a downpour, sudden, violent. I bolted upright in bed, my pulse hammering in my throat. No, this wasn't right. I had checked the forecast. There was no rain scheduled for miles. But outside, I could hear it hammering against the windows, gushing from the motel's drain pipes, pooling in the parking lot. I reached for my phone, fumbling with the screen, checking the weather app with shaking hands. Clear skies. I forced myself to breathe, gripping the sheets, my mind racing. Okay. Maybe it was a freak storm. Maybe that. Tap, tap, tap. It came from the motel room door. I nearly choked on air. No, I didn't move, didn't make a sound. The door had a peephole. I could have looked. I did not. I sat there, frozen, counting my breaths, listening. The rain kept falling. Minutes passed, an hour. Eventually, exhaustion won, and at some point, I must have drifted into a fitful sleep. When I woke up, the rain was gone. The parking lot outside was dry. The air smelled like dust and pavement, like it hadn't seen a drop of water in weeks. And on the floor, just inside my door, was a single wet footprint. I don't know what to do anymore. Running isn't working. Avoiding the rain isn't enough, because now, it's following me even when the sky is clear. And last night, for the first time, I heard it from inside my apartment. A slow, deliberate, unmistakable sound. Tap, 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 right outside my bedroom door. A few years ago, I was working as a night shift nurse in a mid-sized hospital. It wasn't one of those massive medical centers, but it was big enough that you could go entire shifts without seeing some of your coworkers. One night, I was assigned to a floor that specialized in post-opus recovery. Most of the patients were stable, just resting until they were cleared to go home. It was usually a quiet shift, and I liked that. At around 2 a.m., I was making my rounds when I saw that a call light was on for room 409. It was odd because, as far as I knew, that room was empty. The patient who had been in there earlier was discharged before my shift started. I figured maybe one of the aides had forgotten to reset the system, so I walked over, intending to turn it off. When I pushed the door open, I stopped. The bed was occupied. A woman lay there, covered up to her chest with a thin hospital blanket. Her eyes were open, staring straight at the ceiling. At first, I thought maybe I had been mistaken. Maybe a patient had been moved here without me realizing. They haven't. I asked, stepping closer, "Do you need something?" She didn't respond. She didn't blink. Something about the air in the room felt wrong, heavy, stagnant. The usual hum of machines was absent. No monitors, no IV drips, just silence. I reached for the chart at the end of the bed. It was empty. No name, no records, nothing to indicate that anyone should be in this room. Then the call light switched off. I hadn't touched it. I backed out of the room immediately and hurried to the nurse's station. I asked the charge nurse if someone had been moved into 409 without my knowledge. She frowned. 409, and she asked, "That room's been empty all day." I told her what I saw. She gave me a look. They got up and walked with me back to the room. The bed was empty, neatly made, as if no one had been in it at all. I knew what I saw. The worst part, when we checked the system logs, the call light for room 409 had been activated at 2:03 a.m., but there had been no record of anyone turning it off. After that night, I did my best to avoid room 409. If I had to pass it during my rounds, I'd walk faster, keeping my eyes down. I never volunteered to check on anything in there, but hospitals have a way of making you face what you don't want to, and a few weeks later, I was assigned to that section again. It was a particularly hectic night, and I barely had time to think. Around 1:45 a.m., I finally sat down at the nurse's station to catch up on charting. That's when one of the newer aides, Jessica, walked up to me. "Hey," she said, frowning. "The woman in 409 is asking for a nurse." I stopped typing. "There's no one in 409, I said carefully. Jessica blinked. "Oh yeah, there is." She just pressed the call light. I looked in when I walked by, and I saw her lying there. She looked, I don't know, kind of out of it. I stood up so fast my chair scraped the floor. Jessica must have noticed the look on my face because she took a step back. What? I grabbed the patient assignment list and held it out to her. 409 is empty, I said. No one is in that room. Jessica let out a nervous laugh, but when I didn't smile, her expression darkened. You're joking, right? I saw her. I didn't want to go back to that room, but I knew Jessica wouldn't be able to sleep if I didn't check. So together, we walked back down the hall. The door to room 409 was cracked open slightly. A faint glow from the nightlight inside spilled out into the hall. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open all the way. The bed was empty. The blanket was neatly folded, the pillow untouched. But as I stepped inside, a chill passed over me like the kind you get when you walk into a freezer. Jessica stayed at the threshold. I swear I saw someone, she whispered. I moved closer to the bed, looking around for any sign that someone had been there. But there was nothing. No creases in the sheets, no indentation on the pillow, just that overwhelming rawness hanging in the air. Then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The call light button. It was sitting on top of the blanket, right in the center of the bed, like someone had placed it there deliberately. Jessica saw it too. She took a step back. I'm not going back in there, she muttered. I nodded. Neither. We backed out of the room, and I pulled the door shut. Later, when I told some of the older nurses what had happened, one of them, a woman who had worked at the hospital for over 20 years, gave me a strange look. 409, and she asked. That was Margaret's room. Who's Margaret? I asked. The nurse hesitated. Then she sighed. She was a patient a long time ago. Older lady. Had surgery, was supposed to recover fine, but one night, she just coded. No one knows why. It was unexpected. She was alone when it happened. I swallowed hard. Sometimes, new staff see her. She continued, lowering her voice. They think she's just another patient, until they realize she shouldn't be there. I never worked in that section again if I could help it, but every now and then, I'd hear whispers from new nurses talking about room 409, about the woman in the bed, the one who stares at the ceiling, in the call light that always turns off by itself. After that night, I made a point to avoid room 409 at all costs. If I had to work that wing, I'd trade tasks with another nurse, making excuses to keep my rounds away from that room. Most of the time, it worked, but a hospital never lets you outrun the things you don't want to see. One night, about 2 months later, I was put on a short-staffed shift. We were running thin, and I had more patients than usual to check on. I was already exhausted when, around 3:10 a.m., I heard a sound that made my stomach drop. A faint, rhythmic beep, the sound of a heart monitor. That might not seem strange, except room 409 had no equipment in it. I stood frozen outside the nurse's station, listening. The beeping was steady, slow, almost calming, if it weren't coming from an empty room. Jessica, the same aide who had seen the woman weeks ago, was on shift that night too. She walked by, noticed my expression, and followed my gaze. Then she heard it too. Is that... She trailed off. I nodded. Neither of us moved for a long moment. The beeping continued, unchanging, unwavering. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Complete silence. Jessica exhaled sharply. Nope. I'm done. And before I could stop her, she walked straight past the room and down the hall, shaking her head. I didn't blame her, but for some reason, maybe exhaustion, maybe the deep, nagging feeling in my gut, I found myself moving toward the room. The door was slightly ajar, just like before. The light from the hallway barely illuminated the inside. I reached out, hesitant, and nudged the door open wider. The bed was empty. Of course, it was, but this time, something was different. The monitor was AI. It sat beside the bed, plugged in, the screen faintly glowing. But the moment I stepped inside, I felt it again, that unbearable heaviness. Like the air itself didn't want me there. I swallowed hard and took a step back, my fingers tightening around the doorframe. And then the call light turned on and I read. I didn't look back. I didn't check the system log. I just ran. I didn't tell anyone what happened that night, not even Jessica. But from that point on, I refused to work anywhere near room 409. I swapped shifts, traded assignments, did everything I could to stay away. A few weeks later, the hospital renovated that wing, moving the rooms around. The numbers changed. Room 409 no longer existed, but sometimes, late at night, when the halls are quiet and the patients are sleeping, I still hear it. The faint, rhythmic beep of a heart monitor, even when no machines are running. I used to spend a lot of time in the student union, mostly because it had comfortable chairs, free Wi-Fi, and an endless supply of overpriced coffee. The building had this sort of open floor design, with lounge areas scattered between food vendors and study spaces. It always felt busy but safe. There were always people around. Near the back, there was a chess table, not one of those portable sets, but an actual wooden table with the board built into the surface. The pieces were always there, and anyone could sit down and play. Most of the time, people ignored it, except for this one man. He wasn't a a student. That much was obvious. He looked to be in his late 40s, maybe early 50s, always wearing the same dark green windbreaker, even when it was warm outside. He had these sunken eyes and a thin, twitchy frame, like he never quite settled into his own skin. He never spoke to anyone, just sat at the chess table every day, idly moving the pieces, sometimes playing against himself. I first noticed him my sophomore year. I passed by the table, and he'd always be there, staring at the board, never looking up. No one ever sat with him, and he didn't have a backpack, a laptop, or even a book. Just existed there, playing chess with himself. One day, I made the mistake of sitting too close. It was finals week, and all the usual seating areas were packed. The only open chair was at a small round table just a few feet from the chessboard. I hesitated, then sat down, pulling out my laptop. At first, he didn't react. He just kept playing his silent game. Then, I noticed something weird. He wasn't playing correctly. He'd move a piece, stare at it, then put it back, over and over. It was like he was waiting for someone to respond, but no one was there. That's when he spoke. "You play." His voice was hoarse, like he hadn't used it in a while. I looked up, unsure if he was talking to me. His eyes, dark and unblinking, were locked onto mine. I know the basics," I said. He smiled, but it wasn't right. Too wide, too many teeth. "Good," he whispered. "You should know the rules." Something about the way he said it made my stomach twist. I glanced around. The union was still crowded, full of students chatting, studying, scrolling on their phones. Normal life continued as if this man wasn't sitting a few feet away, grinning at me like he knew something I didn't. I forced a polite smile and looked back at my screen. I figured if I ignored him, he'd lose interest. Then, he started moving the pieces again, slowly, deliberately, except now, he was whispering, "Pawn to e4, knight to c6, bishop to b5. I didn't recognize the sequence, but something about the way he said it, soft and measured, like a chant, made my skin crawl. He wasn't talking to me. He was talking to something else. I shut my laptop. I should get going. That's when he did something I'll never forget. He slammed his hand down on the board, scattering the pieces. Several of them clattered to the floor. The noise wasn't loud, but it felt deafening. "No," he hissed. "Not yet." I froze. He wasn't looking at me anymore. His gaze was fixed on the empty chair across from him. Something in me snapped. I grabbed my bag and practically ran. As I hurried toward the exit, I made the mistake of glancing back. He was still staring at the empty chair, and he was nodding. I avoided that part of the student union after that. If I had to go inside, I'd take the long way around, just to make sure I never passed that chess table. A few weeks later, I noticed something strange. The chess set was gone. The table was still there, but the pieces had vanished. I asked one of the employees at the coffee shop nearby if they had moved it. His face went pale. There was never a chess set there. I didn't argue. I just nodded and walked away, my heart hammering. I never saw the man again, and I hope I never do. A year passed, and I had almost convinced myself that the whole thing had been some kind of bizarre hallucination. Stress, lack of sleep, too much caffeine. Maybe my brain had just filled in the blanks of something completely mundane. Then, one night, I found something. It was late, maybe 11 p.m., and I was pulling an all-nighter in the library. Finals were creeping up again, and I had made the brilliant decision to procrastinate until the last possible moment. The library was nearly empty. The only sounds the occasional cough were the quiet tapping of keys from students just as desperate as I was. I was on the third floor, tucked away in one of the study cubicles. The overhead lights buzzed softly, casting a dim glow over the long rows of bookshelves. It was peaceful in a lonely kind of way. I stretched, rubbing my eyes, and decided to take a short break. Standing up, I wandered toward the shelves, running my fingers absent-mindedly along the spines of books. That's when I saw it. Tucked between two thick reference books was a single chess piece, a black knight. I stared at it, my brain struggling to catch up. It wasn't like someone had just left a chess piece lying around. This one was wedged carefully between the books, as if placed there deliberately. Slowly, I reached out and picked it up. It was ice cold. The moment my fingers closed around it, I heard something. A whisper. "Pawn to e4. The exact words the man had muttered at the chess table. I spun around, heart pounding, but the library was still empty. No one was there. I set the knight back down and walked away quickly, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. Just a weird coincidence. But then, as I made my way back to my study cubicle, I noticed something else. On my table, right next to my laptop, was another chess piece. A white queen. I hadn't put it there. I didn't touch it. I grabbed my stuff and left. After that night, things got worse. I started seeing glimpses of him. Not often, and never for long, but enough to make my stomach drop every time. A flash of a green windbreaker disappearing around a corner. A hunched figure sitting on a bench, staring at nothing. Once, I even caught a reflection in a window, a face staring at me from just over my shoulder. But when I turned, no one was there. And then, the dream started, always the same. The chessboard in the middle of an empty room. Pieces moving on their own. A dark figure sitting across from me, hands folded neatly in front of him. And a voice whispering, "You're both." I don't know what he wanted. I don't know what I was supposed to do. All I know is that I stopped playing chess after that. I graduated and moved away, and for a long time, I thought it was over. But a few nights ago, I got a package in the mail. No return address, no note, just a small wooden box. Inside was a single chess piece, a black king. I put it back in the box and shoved it in the back of my closet. I don't know what happens if I play, and I don't want to find out. I tried to ignore it. I really tried. The box with the chess piece sat untouched in the back of my closet, buried beneath old clothes and forgotten notebooks. I told myself it didn't mean anything, that it was just some elaborate prank. But then the text started. The first one came at exactly 3:04 a.m. Unknown number, your move. I stared at my phone, my breath caught in my throat. It had to be a mistake. A wrong number. I didn't respond. The next night, at the exact same time, unknown number, pawn to e4. I blocked the number. It didn't matter. The next night, a different number, the same message. This went on for a week. Each time, a different number. Each time, the same move. And then, something worse. One night, I woke up before the text came. It was instinct, like something had yanked me out of sleep. My room was dark, but something felt off. My heart pounded as I reached for my phone, my fingers shaking. 3:03 a.m., 1 minute before the text would arrive. I held my breath, waiting. Then, a soft tap, not from my phone, from inside my closet. I went still, my fingers tightening around the sheets. It was so quiet, I thought I imagined it. Then it came again. Tap, 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 slow, methodical, like someone or something was knocking from the inside. I forced myself to move. I reached for the lamp and flicked it on, my eyes darting to the closet. The door was closed, but something was wrong. The door handle, it was turned halfway down, like someone had pressed their fingers against it but stopped. I stared, my skin crawling. Then, just as the clock hit 3:04 a.m., my phone buzzed. I almost dropped it. My hands were slick with sweat as I looked down at the screen. The message was different this time. Unknown number, you're taking too long. That was the night I left. I packed a bag and drove to a motel, not even bothering to lock my apartment door behind me. I didn't care. I just needed to be away. For a while, it seemed to work. The text stopped. The knocking stopped. Then, 2 nights ago, I came home. The box, the one with the chess piece I had shoved deep into my closet, was sitting on my kitchen table. The lid was open. The black king was gone, and in its place, a folded slip of paper with 4 words written in perfectly neat handwriting. Checkmate. Say so. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I know one thing. I should have never sat at that table. I was a nursing student at the time, completing my clinical rotations at a mid-sized hospital. It wasn't a prestigious medical center or anything, just a regular hospital with the usual influx of patients, mostly elderly or recovering from surgeries. One night, I was assigned to the night shift for the first time. I wasn't alone, there were 2 other students with me, and of course, the supervising nurses. But the hospital at night had a completely different feel. The bright, bustling energy of the day shift faded into something much quieter, but also, there at around 2 a.m., one of the nurses asked me to check on a patient in room 309. The patient, an older man, had undergone surgery earlier that day and needed his vitals checked. I grabbed the chart and made my way down the dimly lit hallway. When I reached the door, I hesitated. The room felt unusually cold, even from the outside. I knocked softly before stepping in. The room was dark, with only the faint glow of the monitors casting shadows across the walls. The bed was positioned near the window, and at first, I thought the patient was asleep. But something felt off. His breathing was shallow. His chest barely moved. I glanced at the monitors. His heart rate was low, dangerously low. I turned to leave and get the nurse, but as I did, the man in the bed sat up. Not slowly, not groggily, he just sat straight up, like a puppet being yanked by invisible strings. I froze. His face was turned slightly away from me, but I could see his profile. His eyes, they were open, but unfocused. His lips moved, but no sound came out. "Sir," I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He turned his head toward me, too fast, too sharply, and I felt my stomach drop. His eyes were wide now, locked onto mine, and then he smiled, a slow, creeping smile that did not belong on the face of someone who had just been unconscious moments ago. A deep, raspy whisper came from his throat. "You're not supposed to be here." I took a step back. The room suddenly felt suffocating. "I'll get the nurse," I stammered, but as I turned to go, the voice behind me whispered again. "Wrong route." I bolted. I didn't walk. I didn't check the hallway. I just ran. I nearly crashed into the nurse at the station, my words tumbling out in a panic. I told her something something was wrong with the patient in 309, that his vitals were bad, that he was awake and talking strangely. She frowned, flipping through the records. 309, she repeated, looking confused. Yes, he needs help. She shook her head. There's no one at 309. I felt a wave of nausea rise in my throat. What? She turned the chart around, pointing at the entry for room 309. The patient in that room passed away 3 hours ago. I felt the air leave my lungs. The nurse must have noticed the color drain from my face because she quickly added, they moved his body to the morgue already. The room is empty. I shook my head. No, I was just in there. He was in the bed. He sat up. He spoke to me. Her expression darkened. She didn't look at me like I was crazy. She looked unnerved. That made it worse. Are you sure it was 309? She asked carefully. I turned my head back toward the hall, my pulse hammering in my ears. I knew where I had gone. I had checked the door number. I'm sure, I whispered. The nurse stood up. Stay here, she said before walking down the hallway. I sat at the station, my hands shaking. My other classmate looked at me with concern, but I couldn't even form the words to explain. When the nurse returned a minute later, she was frowning. I felt like I was losing my mind. I had seen him. He had looked right at me. And then I remembered what he had whispered. Wrong group. I left my clinical shift early that night. No one made a big deal about it. Maybe they saw the look on my face and figured I wasn't in a state to keep working. But I didn't sleep when I got home. I just kept replaying that moment over and over. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I had been sleep deprived. Maybe the stress of night shifts had gotten to me. Maybe I had just imagined it. But here's the thing. A few days later, I overheard two nurses talking near the break room. Yeah, 309. It's always 309. One of them muttered. My stomach clenched. I pretended to be looking at my phone, but I listened. The last one saw something too. The other nurse whispered they had to send her home. She wouldn't stop crying. Did she say what she saw? A pause. Then, quietly, he sat up. He smiled at her. I left that hospital at the end of my clinical rotations and never went back. I wish I could say that was the end of it. That I left the hospital, finished my rotations, and never thought about room 309 again. But strange things don't always let you go just because you walk away. After that night, I tried to convince myself it was just a hallucination from exhaustion, that my brain had filled in details where there were none. But deep down, I knew better, and it wasn't until I started my residency at a completely different hospital in a completely different city that I realized I hadn't really escaped. It started small. During my first week, I was assigned to the step-down unit, the floor where patients went when they no longer needed intensive care, but still required monitoring. One night, I was doing rounds when I glanced at the room list. My stomach turned to ice. Room 309. I told myself it was just a coincidence. Every hospital had a 309. It wasn't the same hospital. It wasn't the same room. Still, when I approached the door, I hesitated. A deep unease settled in my chest. The patient inside, a woman recovering from pneumonia, was fast asleep, her breathing steady, the soft beep of the monitors normal. Nothing was wrong. I exhaled in relief and turned to leave. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. The monitor screen dimmed, its glow shrinking, like something had stepped in front of it. And then, from the darkness near the foot of the bed, I saw something shift. A shape, too tall, too thin, watching. I flipped on the room light, my heart pounding, but there was nothing there. The patient stirred slightly, but she didn't wake. The monitor flickered back to its normal glow. I stood there for a long time, my breath coming in short, shallow bursts. I scanned every corner of the room, checking the machines, the chairs, even behind the curtains. Nothing. I didn't tell anyone. What could I say? That his shadow had blocked the monitor, that I felt something watching me. No, it sounded ridiculous, but it didn't stop. The next week, I was restocking supplies in an empty room when I heard it. A soft, raspy whisper, wrong route. I spun around, my back slamming against the cabinet. The room was empty. The door was closed. My skin crawled. I stopped doing rounds alone after that. I'd like to say I never encountered it again, but the truth is, I don't think it ever left me. Even now, years later, every hospital I work in, every shift I take, I always glance at the room list first. Because if there's a room 309, I refuse to go inside. And if I ever hear those words again, wrong group, I know better than to look. I work as a piano tuner, not the most thrilling job, but it pays well and I like the solitude. Most of my clients are concert halls, schools, and the occasional private collector with more money than musical ability. I've been doing this for years, and I thought I'd seen everything until last summer. It started with an email, a new client, someone I'd never worked with before. The message was brief. Wrong piano needs tuning, urgent, will pay extra for short notice. Address below, no name, just an address in a neighborhood I didn't recognize. The urgency and the offer of extra extra payment were odd, but not unheard of. Some people get obsessed with getting their instrument perfect, and I never turned down extra cash. When I arrived, the house didn't match the address on the email. It was old, half swallowed by ivy, like no one had lived there for years. The windows were dark, the porch sagging. For a second, I wondered if I had the wrong place, but then I noticed the door was slightly ajar. I hesitated. I should have left, but I had driven over an hour to get there, and something about the air that night, thick and heavy like the sky was pressing down, made me reluctant to go back empty-handed. Inside, the house smelled stale, like wood rot and something faintly metallic. The walls were lined with empty frames, their glass long gone. Dust coated everything except for a single trail of footprints leading deeper into the house. I followed them in. The piano was in the center of what might have once been a ballroom. A massive grand piano, black lacquered, its surface spotless despite the rest of the house's decay. It looked rugged. The proportions were slightly off, like it had been built to fit someone's memory of a piano rather than an actual instrument. I sat on the bench, lifted the lid, and struck a key, a low C. The sound was rugged, not out of tune, just off, like hearing your own voice in a recording and realizing it doesn't sound how you imagine. I pressed another key, then another, the same unsteady resonance. The longer I played, the more it felt like the notes weren't just vibrating in the air, but sinking into the walls, into me. I stopped, out of tune. The voice came from behind me. I nearly jumped out of my skin. A man stood in the doorway, tall and thin, his suit hanging loosely off his frame. His face was hard to focus on, like my eyes refused to land on any one feature. I cleared my throat. Oh yeah, it's definitely... He nodded, stepping into the room. His shoes left no prints in the dust. You can fix it. I swallowed. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but my hands acted on autopilot, reaching into my bag for my tools. I plucked at one of the strings, listening. It wasn't just out of tune, it was wrong. The wire was vibrating in a way I'd never seen before, like it was alive. I hesitated. Where did you get this piano? The man's head tilted slightly. It's always been here. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Who else plays it? He smiled. It plays itself. I stood up, knocking over my stool. I think I should go. He didn't stop me. He just stood there, watching as I backed out of the room. As soon as I stepped outside, the air felt lighter. The pressure in my chest eased. I practically ran to my car. When I turned back, the house, it wasn't there. Just an empty lot, overgrown with weeds. I don't take last-minute tuning jobs anymore, and I don't play pianos unless I can hear them first. I don't know how long I sat in my car, staring at that empty lot. My mind scrambled for explanations. Maybe I'd written the address wrong. Maybe I was overtired, hallucinating, but I felt that house. The dust under my shoes, the weight of the keys under my fingers, the wrongness of the sound. I started my car and drove fast the whole way home. I kept glancing at my rearview mirror, expecting to see the man in the loose suit standing in the middle of the road, but there was nothing, just the hum of my tires on pavement and the sick feeling growing in my stomach. When I got home, I did something I never do. I turned my phone off and locked every door in my apartment. I almost convinced myself I imagined it. Maybe the stress of work had finally gotten to me. Maybe it was a prank. But then, 2 nights later, I got another email. Same address, no subject, no body, just an attachment, a single audio file. I stared at it for a long time, my pulse pounding. I knew I shouldn't open it. I knew, deep down, that whatever was in that file wasn't meant to be heard. But I clicked it anyway. At first, it was nothing, just the soft ambient noise of an empty room. Then, faintly, I heard the sound of a piano. 3 notes, low, dissonant, rugged, the same notes I had played in that house. The sound was warbled, distorted, like it was being played underwater, and under the notes, so faint I almost missed it, was breathing. Not normal breathing, not steady inhales and exhales. It was ragged, like someone gasping through a mouthful of dirt. I slammed my laptop shut, my hands shaking. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the screen, listening to my own breathing, trying to convince myself it was a joke, that someone had followed me, recorded me, altered the sound. But I knew better. That wasn't my recording. That wasn't my breathing. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, every shadow stretching too far across my ceiling, every creak of my apartment settling, sending a fresh bolt of adrenaline through my system. At some point, I must have dozed off because I woke up to a sound, a single piano note from my living room. I froze, my body stiff with fear. My own piano, a small upright I'd had since college, sat against the far wall, untouched. I hadn't played it in weeks. I sat up slowly, my ears straining. Another note, soft, hesitant, like fingers testing the keys. I don't remember grabbing the baseball bat from under my bed, but I must have, because when I stepped into my dark living room, my knuckles were white around the handle. The piano was open. I never leave it open. My breath came fast and shallow. I reached out with the bat, nudging the lid closed with a soft click. Silence. Then, right next to my ear, a whisper, out of tune. I spun, swinging wildly. Nothing, just my empty apartment, my own pulse roaring in my ears. I don't remember remember sleeping after that. The next morning, I drove. I didn't know where I was going, but I had to get away. My hands ached from gripping the wheels so tightly. My head throbbed with exhaustion. I found myself back at the empty lot. I don't know why I stopped. Maybe I needed to see it in daylight, prove to myself that there was nothing there. But as I stepped out of my car, the air around me grew thick, like the atmosphere before a storm, charged and waiting. And then I heard it, soft, almost imperceptible, the sound of a piano, coming from nowhere. I read, I haven't played a piano since. I sold mine the next day. I turned down every tuning job. I started working at a hardware store instead. It doesn't pay as well, but at least the hammers don't play themselves. Sometimes, though, in the dead of night, I still hear it. 3 notes, low, dissonant, rug. The piano hasn't forgotten me. I moved across the country 3 months later. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I changed my phone number, deleted my old email, even paid cash for a new apartment. For a while, it worked. I built a life that had nothing to do with music. No piano, no tuning forks, no sheet music tucked into the corners of my room. I worked with my hands, fixing shelves, cutting lumber. The steady, predictable rhythm of hammers and saws was comforting. The nightmares never completely went away, but they faded. The whispers softened. Until last week. It was late when I got home from work, just past 11. A long day, too much lifting, too much thinking. I was bone tired. I almost didn't notice the package at my door. It was small, wrapped in plain brown paper, no return address. At first, I thought it was a mistake, maybe the wrong apartment, but then I saw my name written imprecise, even letters. My full name. No one here knew my full name. I hesitated, staring at it like it might move. Eventually, curiosity won out. I carried it inside, sat on the floor, and carefully peeled back the paper. Inside was a cassette tape. No label, no markings, just a black plastic shell and a length of brown ribbon wound tight inside. I don't own a cassette player. I hadn't seen one in years, but something in me knew if I didn't listen to it, it would find another way. I borrowed a player from an old thrift store the next day. The woman behind the counter gave me a strange look when I asked if it worked. Not many people listen to tapes anymore, she said. I just need it for one thing, I muttered. She shrugged. Hope it's a good one. I took it home, locked my door, sat on my bed, pressed play. At first, it was static, soft, crackling, like an old record spinning in an empty room. Then the breathing started, shallow, uneven, familiar. I gripped the edges of the player so hard my fingers hurt. A single piano note rang out, low, dissonant, then another, and another. The same 3 notes, the same wrong sound. But this time, there was something new. A voice, hoarse, dry, like it had been buried under the earth. He left before the tuning was finished. I stopped the tape. My hands were shaking. The room was silent, but I felt it. The pressure in the air, the weight of something watching. I turned the tape player over, pried open the back. My stomach lurched. There was no tape inside. The ribbon was empty. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the corner of my room, every light on, clutching the cassette like it was a loaded gun. By dawn, I knew what I had to do. The piano wasn't going to stop. The notes weren't going to stop. Not until I finished the tuning. So now I'm here, back in the old city, back at the empty lot. The sky is overcast, and the wind has that same thick, electric charge. I step forward, my boots crunching against dry leaves. The air humps, and then, just for a second, I see it. The house, dark, waited. The front door is slightly open, and inside, the piano is playing itself. Soft, beckoning, 3 notes, low, dissonant, rug. I take a breath, step inside, and close the door behind me. There was an empty lot near my childhood home. Not abandoned, just empty. No one ever built anything on it. No for sale sign, no grass, just dirt and gravel. It wasn't fenced off, and kids would cut through it on their way home from school. I did too, plenty of times. One evening, when I was about 16, I was walking home later than usual. My route took me past the lot, and I decided to cut through it like I had 100 times before. But as soon as my foot touched the gravel, something felt. The lot wasn't empty. There was a man standing in the center. He wasn't doing anything. Just standing perfectly still. His back was to me, hands in his pockets, looking at nothing. He wasn't there when I approached. I was sure of it, but now he was. I told myself he must have come from the other side, maybe cutting through like I was. But something about him made my skin crawl. He was wearing a long coat, even though it was warm out, and his posture was too rigid, too unnatural. I decided to just keep walking like I hadn't noticed him. I took 1 step. He turned his head, not his body, just his head, unnaturally far, like he had no bones in his neck. I froze. His face was wrong. I don't know how else to explain it. It was like looking at someone who had learned to smile by reading about it, but had never actually seen one. His mouth was too wide, his teeth too many, his eyes too focused. I turned and walked away as fast as I could without running. My whole body screamed at me to move, but I didn't want to let him know I was scared. I kept my pace steady. Then I heard it. Gravel shifting, footsteps. I forced myself to keep going. My house wasn't far. I could make it. Just a few more blocks. The sound of footsteps behind me stopped, but I didn't dare look back. I reached my front porch, unlocked the door, and shut it behind me. My hands were shaking. I flicked on the porch light and peered through the peephole. The empty lot was empty again. I didn't take that shortcut ever again, and I never saw the man again. But sometimes, when I pass by that lot, I feel like something is watching. A few years passed, and I had almost convinced myself that it had been my imagination, a trick of the evening light, a tired brain conjuring something that wasn't there. Almost. Then, last summer, I came back to visit my parents. The town hadn't changed much, but something about it felt different, like it had been holding its breath. One night, I was driving home after meeting an old friend. My route didn't take me past the lot anymore, but I had to pass close to it. As I approached the intersection near it, my headlights swept over the lot's edge, and I saw something standing there. Not a man, not exactly. A shape, tall and still, just like before. But this time, it was facing me. I couldn't see the details, just a silhouette, something standing too perfectly still, watching. The memory of that smile, that wrongness, hit me like a punch to the gut. My hands clutched the wheel. I didn't stop. I told myself it was nothing, just some random person, a shadow, a trick of the dark. Then I got home. I parked in my parents' driveway, took a deep breath, and glanced at my rearview mirror. The lot was more than 6 blocks away, but something was standing under the street light at the end of the road. I went inside and locked every door. I didn't see it again for the rest of my visit. I even forced myself to drive past the lot during the day just to prove to myself that it was fine. It was just a patch of gravel and dirt. Nothing strange. But on my last night in town, I had a dream. I was back in the empty lot, but this time it wasn't empty. There were no buildings, no trees, no fences, just figures. Dozens of them standing completely still, all of them facing me. Their faces were blurred, shifting, mouths stretched into 2 wide smiles. Then, one by one, they began to turn their heads, slow, unnatural, like cracking joints. The last one, the one closest to me, was the man from before. His mouth moved, but I don't remember hearing words. Just a sound, something low and guttural, like laughter that didn't belong in a human throat. I woke up covered in sweat, my ears ringing. I didn't go back to that town for a long time, but sometimes, when I drive through unfamiliar places, I see empty lots. And sometimes, just for a second, I think I see someone standing there, waiting, watching, and I stayed away from my hometown for years. I built a life somewhere else, far away from that lot, from the strange man, from the dream I refused to think about. But a few months ago, my mother got sick. It wasn't serious at first, but my dad called me one night and said, "You should come home, just in case." So I packed a bag and made the drive back. The moment I crossed into town, I felt it, that breathless sensation, like something had been waiting for me to return. I ignored it. I told myself it was just nostalgia mixed with nerves. I avoided the lot. I didn't even look in its direction, at least, not at first. It happened on my 3rd night back. I was staying in my childhood bedroom, tossing and turning, unable to sleep. The house was quiet, except for the occasional creak of the pipes. Then I heard it, a soft knock on my window. My stomach dropped. I froze, my body refusing to move. My bedroom was on the 2nd floor. Another knock, deliberate, leisured. I forced myself to turn my head to look. There was nothing there, just the dark glass, reflecting my own pale face back at me. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I went downstairs and found my dad in the kitchen. "You alright?" he asked. I hesitated. "Yeah, just couldn't sleep." He gave me a knowing look, like he wanted to say something but wasn't sure if he should. I let it go. Later that day, I had to run to the pharmacy for my mom. I took the long way, intentionally avoiding the lot. But on my way back, at the last second, my hands seemed to move on their own, turning the wheel down the street I had sworn not to take. I told myself I was just looking, just checking. It was still empty, just dirt and gravel. No bed, no figures, nothing. But there were footprints in the dust, not just one set, dozens, and all of them led out of the lot. I hit the gas and didn't look back. That night, after my parents went to bed, my dad knocked on my door. "You got a minute?" he asked, stepping inside before I could answer. He sat on the edge of my bed, rubbing a hand over his face like he was trying to decide how to start. Then, after a long silence, he said, "I saw him too." I felt the blood drain from my face. "When?" I whispered. My dad exhaled. "Years ago, when we first moved here. I was out late, walking the dog, cut through the lot like everyone else did back then, and I saw him, same as you." I gripped my blanket, my knuckles white. He was just standing there. My dad continued, "Didn't move. off, didn't speak, but I swear to God, I felt him watching me even though he never turned around. I swallowed hard. What did you do? I left, he said simply, and I never walked through there again. A long silence stretched between us. Then my dad said something that made my skin crawl. You said he turned his head, right? When you saw him, and I nodded. My dad looked down at his hands. He never did that when I saw him. I didn't sleep that night either. I left town the next day. My mom was doing better, and I couldn't stay any longer. As I drove past the edge of town, I forced myself to look in the rearview mirror, just to be sure. The lot was empty, but standing at the very edge of the gravel, just before the sidewalk, was a figure, perfectly still, head turned toward me, mouth stretched into a wide, unnatural smile. I pressed my foot down on the gas. It started with a single paper crane. I work at a university, but not as a student or a professor. I'm just one of the people who keep things running in the background. My job is mostly quiet, handling inventory and deliveries, making sure equipment gets where it needs to go. It's a job that doesn't usually invite attention, but someone was paying attention to me. The first time I noticed the crane, it was sitting on my desk in the supply room, a perfectly folded piece of white paper, no note, no explanation. I assumed it was a joke or something left behind by a coworker, so I just tossed it in the trash. The next day, there were two cranes. They were balanced on top of a box of printer paper, identical in their precision. Something about them unsettled me. I asked around, but no one claimed that maybe one of the students. My manager suggested they wander in here sometimes. By the end of the week, there were 7, always perfectly folded, always placed where I would find them. That's when I started checking the cameras. The supply room has a security camera facing the door. It's mostly there in case anything gets stolen, but it should have caught whoever was leaving these things. I sat down in the security office and scrolled through the footage from the past few nights, and that's when I saw him. At exactly 3:13 a.m., the door to the supply room opened, though no one had swiped a key card. A man walked in, tall, wearing an old-fashioned coat that reached down to his ankles. His face was just rugged, blurred, like the camera couldn't quite capture it. He walked straight to my desk, pulled something from his pocket, and carefully placed it down. A paper crane. Then he turned, walked out, and the door shut behind him. No hesitation, no wondering, like he had done this 100 times before. I checked the logs. No one was supposed to have been in the building at that hour. I asked security if they recognized him, but the footage wouldn't play properly when I tried to show them. The file just glitched. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the man's blurred face. The next morning, I arrived at work early, dreading what I might find. This time, there weren't just paper cranes. Spread across my desk were dozens of origami figures, birds, stars, flowers, things I didn't even recognize. And in the center was a folded note. My hands were shaking as I opened it. You're not supposed to be here. I don't work at the university anymore. I don't even live in the same city. And if I ever see another paper crane, I'm burning it before I open it. I wish I could say that was the end of it. That leaving the city, changing jobs, and cutting ties with that university was enough. But I think, deep down, I knew that wouldn't be the case. It took months before I stopped jumping at shadows. I moved across the state, found a new place, and took a job at a small logistics company. Nothing special, just moving inventory, much like before. No cameras, no security rooms, no late night university buildings. I kept my head down and my routine predictable. I told myself I was safe, and I was, for a while. Then, one morning, I found it, a single paper crane. It was sitting in the cup holder of my car. I hadn't noticed it when I got in, just threw my coffee in the console and started driving. It wasn't until I hit a red light and reached down for a sip that my fingers brushed something smooth and stiff. My stomach dropped. I didn't unfold it. I didn't want to know what was inside. I threw it out of the window and tried to convince myself it was nothing, just some random, meaningless coincidence. But it wasn't. That night, I locked my doors, checked my windows, and forced myself to sleep. No more paranoia, I told myself. No more looking over my shoulder. At exactly 3:13 a.m., I woke up, not because of a noise, not because of a dream. I woke up because I felt something. The air in the room was heavy, like I wasn't alone. My bedroom was dark except for the blinking light of my alarm clock, glowing red against the shadows. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then, from the foot of my bed, I heard it, a soft, papery rustling, like the whisper of 100 tiny wings. I don't remember moving, but I must have, because the next thing I knew, I was running. I barely registered the cold floor beneath my feet, the harsh slam of the front door as I threw myself outside. I didn't stop running until I was in my car, engine roaring to life, tires screeching as I tore out of the driveway. I drove for hours, not knowing where I was going, just knowing I couldn't go back. When the sun finally rose, I pulled over in a gas station parking lot, hands hands clenched around the steering wheel. I forced myself to look at the back seat. It was empty. I let out a shuddering breath. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe I had just panicked. But then I glanced at the passenger seat. A single, perfectly folded paper crane sat there, and beneath it, another note. This time, I read it. You can't leave. I don't know what to do. I haven't been back to my apartment. Haven't even been back to that city. I've been living out of motels, never stayed anywhere longer than a few nights. But it doesn't matter, because wherever I go, I always wake up at 3:13 a.m., and the cranes always find me. I wish I could say I had a plan, that I knew what I was running from or how to stop it, but the truth is, I don't. I've been on the move for weeks now, switching motels, paying in cash, leaving no paper trail. I even ditched my phone, thinking maybe I was being tracked. It didn't make a difference, because every single night, no matter where I go, I wake up at exactly 3:13 a.m., and there's always a crane. Sometimes, I find it on the nightstand beside my bed. Sometimes, it's on the dashboard of my car. One time, I woke up and felt something crinkle under my hand. It was in my bed with me. I tried destroying them. I burned one in a motel sink, watched the flames curl around its delicate edges until it was nothing but ash. The next morning, it was back, sitting in the same spot I had found it, pristine and untouched. I stopped trying after that. But last night was different. I was holed up at a roadside motel off the interstate, some no-name place that smelled like mildew and desperation. I had double locked the door, blocked it with a chair, and left the bathroom light on because darkness felt too much like an invitation. But at 3:13 a.m., I woke up anyway. At first, I thought it was just another night, another crane waiting for me in some quiet, patient spot. But then I noticed something. The air felt different, thicker, like something else was in the room with me. I turned my head slowly, heart pounding, every muscle in my body screaming at me to run. But I didn't run. I couldn't, because in the corner of the room, half hidden in the dim glow of the bathroom light, he was standing there, the man with the paper birds. He was taller than I remembered, his long coat draping around him like a second skin, and his face was still wrong, blurred, shifting, like the edges of an unfinished sketch. He didn't move, didn't speak, he just watched me, and in his hands, he held something, not a crane this time, a note. My mouth was dry, my hands gripping the sheets so tightly my knuckles ached. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but all I could do was stare as he tilted his head, his fingers releasing the note. It drifted down to the carpet like a dead leaf, and then he was gone, just gone, like he had never been there at all. I didn't move for a long time and just lay there, listening to the silence, waiting for something else to happen, but nothing did. Finally, with shaking hands, I reached down and picked up the note. It was different from the others. Not cleaned, not perfect. The edges were frayed, the paper slightly yellowed, like it had been handled too many times before, and the message wasn't typed. It was handwritten. Stop running. Come back. I don't know what it means. I don't know what happens if I listen, but I think I'm running out of choices. And I know that if I don't go back soon, he's going to take me there himself. This happened a few years ago when I was working at a large convention center. I was just a part-time staffer, mostly handling attendee check-ins, lost badges, and general guest services. The place was massive, long, echoing halls, labyrinthine service corridors, and a general sense of being too big for the number of people actually working there. Most nights, by the time my shift ended, the main halls would be empty. The janitorial staff worked late, but they mostly stuck to the exhibition floors and food courts. My last task before heading out was always checking the lost and found desk, located in a glass-walled room near the main entrance. People lost things constantly, keys, wallets, entire bags sometimes. It was my job to log them in before security took over for the night. One evening, after a particularly chaotic event, I stayed late to sort through a pile of lost items. I was alone in the glass room, scanning ID cards and cataloging forgotten scarves when I noticed movement outside. A man was standing just beyond the entrance to the lost and found area, staring in at me. At first, I assumed he was a latecomer looking for something he'd lost, so I gave him the standard polite nod. He didn't move. He didn't even blink. He just stood there. Something about him unsettled me immediately. He wasn't disheveled or obviously dangerous, but there was an uncanny stillness to him, like he wasn't quite sure how to imitate human behavior. He was tall, wearing a neatly pressed gray coat, and his hands were clasped in front of him. His eyes were just too focused. I swallowed my unease and forced a smile. Hi there, are you looking for something? Nothing, just staring. I tried again. Sir, do you need help? Slowly, he lifted one one hand and pointed not at the lost items, but at my desk. Now I was getting genuinely freaked out. I looked down at my desk, half expecting to see something unusual, just the usual pile of phones, wallets, and forgotten lanyards. When I looked back up, he was closer, not by much, but enough that I knew he hadn't walked normally. I hadn't looked away for more than a second, but there he was, just a few steps from the glass wall now. His expression hadn't changed. Something inside me screamed to leave. I stood up, trying to act casual, lost, and found his clothes for the night. I said, inching toward the exit, "If you come back tomorrow." Then he moved, not walked, moved, like a skipping frame in a broken video. He was subtly inches from the glass, face nearly pressed against it. I stumbled backward, hard hammering. He was still pointing at my desk, but his head had tilted slightly, like he was listening for something. And then I heard it, a small tap, not from the man, but from the pile of lost items. I whipped around. Nothing looked out of place, except for a single key that had shifted slightly, as if it had just been placed there. The second I looked away, I felt the air change. I turned back, and he was inside the room. No sound, no movement, just inside. I read. I don't even remember making the decision. I was just suddenly in the hallway, sprinting toward the security office. I didn't stop until I reached one of the night guards. Of course, when they checked lost and found, the room was empty. The cameras glitched. That's what the security guy told me. Just a second of static during the exact moment I left my desk. Nothing was stolen, nothing was out of place, except for that key. I checked the logs later, though what had turned it in, it hadn't been in the pile when I started sorting. I wish I could say that was the last time I saw him. After that night, I refused to take late shifts. I didn't tell my boss the real reason, just blamed my college workload. A few coworkers joked that I just wanted to dodge the boring end of night routine, but I didn't care. As long as I could avoid being alone in that glass-walled room, I was fine. For a while, nothing happened. No strange encounters, no missing time, no misplaced keys. I convinced myself that maybe I had just been tired, stressed, imagining things. But then, the security guard who checked the cameras that night, he quit. No warning, no 2-week notice. Just stopped showing up. I only found out because another employee mentioned it in passing. Yeah, he called out sick for a week, and then his supervisor said he wasn't coming back. Real weird. I wanted to ask more, but I was afraid of sounding paranoid. Then one day, while I was working a mid-afternoon shift, I found something strange. It was an envelope. No name, no postage, just sitting under my keyboard like someone had carefully slid it there. Inside was a photograph. It showed the lost and found room, the same glass walls, the same cluttered desk, but something was off. I looked closer, my stomach dropping. It was a picture of me, sitting at the desk, sorting through lost items. I had never seen this photo before, never posed for it, but there I was, in the exact same chair, wearing the exact same sweater I had worn on the night of the man in the gray coat. The timestamp in the bottom corner, it was from 2 nights ago. I hadn't worked that shift. I hadn't been in the lost and found room 2 nights ago. I flipped the photo over with shaking hands. Written in neat, looping handwriting were 4 words. "You forgot the key." I slammed the envelope shut, shoved it deep into my bag, and forced myself to act normal for the rest of my shift. That night, when I got home, I checked my backpack where I had stuffed the photo. It was gone. I tore my room apart. I emptied my bag, my pockets, my jacket. Nothing. The envelope had vanished. But the next day, when I arrived at work, the key was back. It sat neatly on my desk and lost and found, as if it had never left. No one knew where it had come from. No one had locked it in. And when I touched it, for just a second, I thought I saw a reflection in the glass wall. A tall man in a gray coat. I should have quit right then and there. I told myself I would. That night, after seeing the key back on my desk, I swore I'd walk out, block the number of my supervisor, and never step foot in that convention center again. But I didn't. Something about the key, it was like it had anchored me there. Like the moment I touched it, something deep inside whispered, "You're not done yet." I should have ignored it, but I didn't. Instead, I did something incredibly stupid. I took the key home. The key wasn't anything special to look at. It was small, brass, oiled, no brand, no engraving, just a single worn tooth like it had been used 1,000 times before. But the moment it sat in my pocket, I felt heavier, like I had agreed to something I didn't understand. Still, I convinced myself I was being ridiculous. I tossed it onto my nightstand and tried to sleep. At exactly 3:12 a.m., I woke up, not in a slow, groggy way. No, I was suddenly, sharply aware, heart racing, skin crawling, like something had just shifted in the air around me. The key was gone. My breath caught. I had left it right there before falling asleep. Then I heard it, a soft tap from inside my closet. I didn't move. Another tap. Then, slowly, the sound of breathing. Not my own, shallow, deliberate, just beyond the door. I lay there, frozen, staring at my closet. My bedroom was small. There was no way someone could be in in there without me noticing, but the breathing continued, slow and rhythmic, like whoever or whatever it was knew I was awake. I don't know how long I stayed like that, barely breathing, barely thinking, but then, click, the sound of a key turning in a lock, not from my front door, not from my window, from inside my closet, and then silence, no breathing, no movement, just the hollow, waiting silence of something that wasn't finished yet. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I should have gotten rid of it, should have thrown it into a sewer, burned it, buried it, but I didn't, because when I finally gathered the nerve to check my closet the next morning, the key was sitting neatly on the floor, like it had returned itself, like it was waiting, and worse, there were footprints, faint, dusty imprints on my floorboards, leading from my closet to my bed. Standing there, heart hammering in my chest, I made a decision. I had to go back to the lost and found desk. I had to return the key. That evening, I walked back into the convention center for what I told myself would be the last time. The building was mostly empty, just a few janitors finishing up. I told the front desk I'd left something in the lost and found room, then made my way there, my pulse steady but my skin crawly. The glass-walled room looked the same, but as soon as I stepped inside, I felt it. The air was thick, heavy, charged. I walked to my desk, placed the key down carefully, and whispered, "I'm done." And for a moment, nothing happened. Then, a soft tap from behind me. I turned slowly. He was there, the man in the gray coat, standing just outside the glass wall, hands clasped, watching, but this time, something was different. He wasn't pointing at my desk. He was pointing at the chair, at the exact seat where I always sat. The realization hit me like ice in my veins. He wasn't just watching, he was waiting for me to sit, for me to take my place, for me to become the next one. I didn't think, didn't breathe, I ran, didn't stop until I was outside in the freezing night air, gasping, heart in my throat. I didn't look back. I never stepped inside that convention center again. It's been months. I moved to another city, started a new job. I've done everything I can to put that night behind me, but last week, I got a package in the mail, no return address. Inside was a single item, a cut, and a small note written in neat, looping handwriting. "You left something behind." I work as a substitute teacher, which means I spend most of my days floating between schools, filling in for absent staff. It's a job that's easy enough, mostly just keeping kids in line and making sure they don't set anything on fire. A few weeks ago, I was assigned to a small middle school in a quiet town. I had never been there before, but everything seemed normal. Long hallways, outdated motivational posters, that faint smell of industrial cleaner and preteen body spray. It was just another gig. The day was uneventful until the last period. That's when the lockdown drill started. Now, I've been through plenty of these. Everyone gets up, moves to the designated safe spot, lights off, doors locked, simple. But this one was different. The announcement came over the intercom, but something was off about the voice. It was distorted, like someone was speaking too close to the microphone. It didn't sound like the principal. Lockdown, this is not a drill. My stomach dropped. The students immediately got quiet, their usual giggles and groans disappearing as they hurried to the corner of the classroom, away from the door. I followed protocol, locking the door and switching off the lights. The room was silent except for the sound of a girl quietly crying. Then we waited. Lockdowns usually end with another announcement from the principal or a knock from security. But after 10 minutes, there was nothing. 15 minutes, 20. One of the kids, a boy near the back, whispered, "Shouldn't we be getting an all clear?" He was right. This was taking too long. Then I heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving down the hall. Someone was out there. I pressed my ear against the door, barely breathing. Whoever it was wasn't in a hurry. They were just walking, pacing, occasionally stopping, and then a knock, soft and almost polite. I felt the students tense behind me. Another knock. Then the handle turned. I had locked it, but my heart pounded as I watched it jiggle. Someone was testing the door. A long silence followed, and then the whispering started. I couldn't make out words. It was faint, like someone muttering just below their breath, but it wasn't coming from one person. It was coming from multiple. I turned, mouthing "Stay quiet" to the kids, who were huddled together in the dark. The whispering grew, overlapping voices murmuring from outside the door, the hall, maybe even other classrooms. Then the intercom crackled again. The same distorted voice. Lockdown lifted. "You may exit your classrooms." No way. Something was very wrong. I didn't move. The kids didn't move. More footsteps. More whispers. Then I heard a door down the hall opened. Someone had believed the announcement. A shuffle. A gasp. Then silence. No screams. No running. Just nothing. I stayed in that classroom for over an hour, ignoring the next 3 announcements telling us the lockdown was over. Eventually, the real principal's voice came through. This time, it sounded real. When I finally opened the door, the hallway was empty, but something had changed. The school felt wrong, too quiet, too still. Later, I found out that another teacher had opened their door too soon. They never found him. There was no intruder, no reports, no explanation. I never went back to that school. I wish I could tell you that was the end of it, that I left the school, shook it off as an overactive imagination, and moved on. But I didn't, because whatever happened in that school, whatever thing was outside my door that day, didn't stay there. A few weeks later, I was at another school, a different district altogether. It was a high school this time, bigger, noisier. I had almost convinced myself that what happened before was just a bizarre, unexplainable fluke, until it happened again. The day had been normal, students half listening, phones hidden under desks, the usual. Then, right before the final bell, the intercom crackled to light. Lockdown, this is not a drill. My body went cold. The same voice, that warped, too close to the mic voice. I scanned the students' faces. Most of them looked bored, some confused. None of them knew. None of them had heard it before, but I had. I forced myself to move, locking the door, turning off the lights. The students, though reluctant, followed instructions, but my hands were shaking. I didn't know if it was fear or adrenaline. Minutes passed, no sirens, no security knocking on doors. Then came the footsteps. They were faster this time, not the slow, deliberate pacing from before. More urgent, more erratic. Thump, thump, thump. The running stopped right outside my door. I bit down on my lips so hard I tasted blood. The students were still, some holding their breath. Then, they'll, louder than before. Harder. I clenched my fists, pressing my back against the desk. The handle twitched, turned, still locked, but I swear, it felt like something was pushing against the door from the other side. Not like a person trying to break in, but something else. Like a presence, an unseen weight pressing against the barrier between us. Then came the whispering, not from the door, from inside the room. I spun around so fast I nearly knocked over a chair. The students were frozen, eyes wide. The whispering came from the air itself, like a breath behind my ear, curling around the room, settling into every shadowed corner. I don't know how long it lasted. Time stretched, bent. Then, just like before, lockdown lifted. You may exit your classrooms. But this time, I saw something, a shadow, just outside the window of the classroom door, standing motionless. I could barely make out the shape, a distortion like heat rising from pavement. It was watching. I knew better than to open the door. I waited, an hour, then another. Finally, a second announcement came, this time in the real principal's voice. When I finally stepped outside, the hallway was silent. No students, no teachers. Then I saw the locker, just one. Its door was hanging open, and inside, scrawled into the metal with deep, jagged marks, was a message. A message for me. You listened. Good. That was the last time I took a teaching job. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it wants, but I have a feeling it isn't done with me yet. I quit teaching after that. It wasn't just paranoia. I could feel something following me. It didn't matter how far I moved, what I did, or how much I tried to rationalize it. I could feel it in places it had no right to be. In the grocery store, where the overhead speakers crackled with a static-drenched whisper just for a second. At home, where my TV would flicker to a blank channel, and I'd swear I saw movement just before it cut back to normal. On the street, where I'd hear footsteps stop just as I did, only to turn and find nothing there. But the worst came when I took a job at a bookstore. It was supposed to be safe, quiet, no more classrooms, no more intercoms, just books and customers who barely talked to me. And for a while, it was, until one night, it was near closing. I was alone, shelving the last of the returns. The place was dim, filled with the soft hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of traffic outside. Then, just as I was locking up, the intercom came on and I froze. Lockdown. This is not a drill. No, not here. My breath hitched. The store didn't even have an intercom. The lights flickered. The speakers hissed. Then, the footsteps, not from the front, from the back room, the stock room, where no one should have been. I moved slowly, my fingers gripping the key so hard it dug into my palm. I needed to leave. I needed to get out right now. But as I turned to run, I heard it. Look. From inside the stock room, the door was slightly ajar, and the whispering, it filled the air, curling around me like unseen fingers. My vision blurred, my body locking up with an instinct I didn't understand, like prey caught in a trap. I turned my head. There, beyond the crack in the stockroom door, the shadow, twisted, rug. It didn't move. It didn't breathe, but I knew it was looking at at me, and then, clear as day, as if someone was whispering directly into my ear, "You ascended. Good." I read. I don't remember getting home. I don't remember locking my doors, pulling my curtains shut, or turning every single light on. I just remember sitting on the floor of my apartment, shaking, as my phone buzzed with a notification. An email from an address I didn't recognize. No subject, no body, just an attachment, an audio file. I shouldn't have played it, but I did. The recording was short, only a few seconds long. A burst of static, a distant, distorted voice, and then look. I threw my phone across the room. I haven't gone back to work. I barely leave my apartment, but sometimes, late at night, when everything is still, my speakers crackle. Alright, but that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and comment something down below. But as always,
Have a nice day.